it's not a cakewalk. I tell people it's buggy, it's wet, it's nasty. You're going to sweat a lot. You're going to be thirsty. You're going to bring food. I said, you're going to maybe get tired of carrying your backpack. I said, I said, it's not a cakewalk. It's not glamorous. And only the people that are really serious, I'll go with, or they'll go with me. And we usually keep the teams down to generally three people or less, but I've been known to have 2 other people in our groups and have 5 people there. Usually with 5 people, we split into 2 groups, and we have, that way we don't have a crowd of people bushwhacking or going through a forested area, just creating a ruckus. I mean, I don't go ninja. I just talk like I'm talking to you right now, and that's how we do our excursions. They know we're here. They hear us. It's when you try to be sneaky and try to creep around, that's where the distrust comes in. And I've seen like all things go quiet and disappear when I've been with people that try to do that. I just say, when you're being yourself and you're walking in, a lot of times, if they're watching you, which they generally are most of the time, they make the determination you're not a threat. You're relaxed. You're talking. You're being normal. But go in and try to act like you're part of SEAL Team 6 and you're going in, you're going to have a difficulty giving any. You might get some vocalizations, but maybe that's all you're going to get. So so that's what I've been, the methodology, if you want to call it methodology, that's what I do when I go out and do research. Whether it's
I think
on
it's
my
cool
own.
how much it's changed since I've been doing the podcast and doing Squatch and everything myself. That everybody, when I first started, it was all about trying to be stealthy, trying to sneak in, trying to make it so that they're not alerted that you're there. And now it seems like everybody's moved into this point where they're basically like, yeah, we set up a campfire, we start making hot dogs, we hang out, and then they start coming into us.
Yeah.
And the other
Yeah.
cool part is everybody used to do big groups. And I used to always say like 3 feels like it's like the perfect number. So it's really cool that everybody's starting to stick to like the most that I usually hear is people do 3 to 5 in groups going out. Sometimes they'll have 2 groups that go out at a time. And then there's usually about 2 to 3 people that are at base camp. So for the most part, you may have a bigger group, but everybody's, splitting into 3, 5. That seems to be the average. So it's really cool that I feel like we're really starting to get to a point with this research where we're really starting to figure out the best means and tactics of doing things, especially considering that, this has been an ongoing thing that people have been researching since 60s, like seriously, like writing books and researching it, not just, talking about it like from the aspect of living amongst this type of stuff. But it's kind of cool that we're getting to a point now where everybody's starting to talk so we can actually start putting this information together and figure out the best tactics to actually having some luck when you go out and go squatching.
Yes, I found that some of the most serious researchers, which are probably, less than 1% of all the researchers, if you want to name all the groups and organization, which number into the hundreds, there's a handful of researchers that have their own, if you want to say groups or their own members to their group, and usually they do go out in smaller numbers. And if they're, I've been invited to these squatch outs, as they call them, out in the Southeast. I've been invited to squatch outs, which could be 70 to 150 people. And so
good luck with anything with that.
Yeah.
Like,
what happens is the people with the success that do to go to these squatch outs, they go, if Bigfoot is watching all this noise, music, people eating, having a good time, which I believe they do, because they watch me with just like my son at a camp out and gave it some interesting, but if you have 70 people, they're going to post up quite a distance away and just observe everything. And I occasionally hear about it in these type of gatherings where there's a lot of people that are enthusiasts or researchers all get together, and there's a number of 50, could be up to 100 of them. There'll always be someone that'll say, I'm going to find a spot where I could observe everybody at this big gathering and pick go see where, pretend I'm Bigfoot. Where would I pick a spot where I could have a complete view of this event, and where is a perfect place to go post up to see? It might be 100 yards away or 50 yards away. And those people, they're the outliers. They'll go that do that, and they'll end up having activity where rocks are thrown at them, or they'll get like a warning whoop, like, hey, we got a human here, and they all take off, and they'll hear them crashing through the woods away from them.
I've
Those are
heard
the
a few
guys that have the
stories of people
success.
that have set up the outside tents, like just outside
Oh,
of the
yes.
campsite, pushed away from people, and they'll get stuff like tent rustling at night and stuff like that. Because they'll come up and they'll come to check out the bigger group, but they'll be in the process of them walking up, so they end up getting the Sasquatches walking past to investigate later at night. Like that's the
Oh, yeah,
spot
and
to go,
that's
man.
usually when you close down, you're done for the evening, you decide, okay, I'm getting in my tent or van or whatever, and everything goes down quiet. Those members of that group, the family union, they'll come down and yeah, they'll go through your campground. They're going, everybody's usually 10 to 1 in the morning. Everybody's, called in a night. They'll come down and they'll investigate everything, the coolers. They'll see your equipment, anything that they smell that they seem to like. They'll go mess with it. To even going up to walking around people's tents. And I think they know the difference between somebody snoring and somebody who's awake. I think they can tell. I can tell it with, I've been married 40 years. I know if my wife isn't slightly snoring and I hear total silence, I will like check her out and see is she all right or is she awake? And so I can tell when I go out with a group of people and we're all in our tents. I can tell people are sleeping or if they're awake. You hear them rustling, and that was a situation I ran into when I was in Wisconsin, where there was 5 of us, and at that point I had never been out with more than 2, maybe 1 other person or 2 other people at a time. So my groups were like 1 other person other than me, or there might be 2 or 3 other people. So when I went to this event, there was me, Ricky, Dave, Mitch, and Randy. So there was 5 of us. Yeah, Mitch, yeah, Randy, Dave, Ricardo, and me. Yeah, there's 5 of us. And we all had our own tents. And we didn't hear anything during the day. We found structure. I saw things on flare at dusk. When things started getting dark, I started seeing things on thermal, just dark patches among the foliage and the tree line next to where we were camping. Stuff like that, which I sort of expected. But then when things got quiet and everybody went to their individual tent, shut the tent door, and everybody went to sleep, that's when activity seemed to always start. And I came to the conclusion, the adult, whether you want to call it the female alpha or the male alpha, whoever's in charge of these group of what I call adolescents, Bigfoot or juvenile Bigfoot, it seemed like one came in, and at least one, could have been more than one, came in and checked every one of our tents out, all 5 of our tents. And we got up that following morning. I had a story. My friend Dave had a story. Everybody was like, is the one that was on next to your tent scratching? Was he over by my tent? Just weird stuff like that. And you're going, and then one morning, another morning, they apparently had been in camp at night. In the morning, at about 4:45, 4:30, it started getting light out. And we heard something outside the perimeter of where we were camping. I didn't hear it. I heard the tree breaks, like something was walking in or moving around and busting saplings over with both of its hands. As it was, and when I mean saplings, these are 6, 7, 8, 9 foot tall little pine trees, and they're breaking them over. And it was stomping. I heard the stomping and the thumping. It sounded like it was either beating on its chest or stomping on the ground or actually pummeling the ground with their fists. And then I heard the breaking. And the guys, when I woke up to that, I listened to the other guy's account who woke up before I did. And they go, no, you missed the other part. And I go, what other part? When it came in, it was roaring. And I go, roaring? He goes, yeah, roaring like a lion. And I go, I missed it because I was so tired. I was like, I didn't catch it. Because the night before, I got interrupted at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Or it was probably earlier than that, probably closer to 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. I got interrupted in the middle of the night with a creature walking up to my tent and pushing through the mesh, through the nylon tenting, and with its hand, and my back was to the rear of the tent. I was laying on my right shoulder with my back against the tent, and it placed its hand. It felt like a hand in the middle of my back between my shoulder blades, push on me, and it rolled me over on my stomach. And my jaw dropped. Yeah. I was like, I wasn't scared. I was like surprised at the boldness. But I had 3, maybe 4 shopping bags of paper bags, because this was back in, this is a few years ago, but I got the paper bags. I didn't want to deal with plastic. I came out there and I had a little mountain tent, which barely has the footprint of one. It's big enough for one person. So when I'm laying there, I have my back against the tent. I could just like reach forward a little and touch the front of the tent, and I'm facing the front of the tent. And I heard the thing walk up in this tall grass. You could hear it walk just like like you or I would walk. I hear it casually walk up. I have 4 grocery bags on the back of my tent lined up. I had one with, I think, some bread and coffee and sugar. And then I had another one with, I think, fruit or whatever in it. So I'm thinking to myself later, you should have put all that away. That was a bear. It was untouched. None of the bags were messed with. You could tell when bags are being moved, paper bags. None of the bags were messed with. And then I got pushed over, and I'm thinking, that was no bear snout. And why didn't it take any of the fruit? I had sugar. I had all the stuff bears usually dig into and tear up or eat. And I thought later on, when I told the guys about it, they said, well, what did you do right before that happened? Were you like sleeping, or what happened? Were you sleeping? And I go, no, sometimes I got to get up once or twice a night to urinate. So not wanting to walk out into the black, it was overcast too, so you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So I had developed a plan for that. I always bring like a big like Gatorade bottle or a mason jar.
You know what's the best for peeing while you're camping in the tent? Those Arizona, the big jugs of Arizona. Just a random thought. Those things are like perfect because they got the wider top and they have a good amount that they can hold. Fantastic.
And also I learned they don't make the big mouth Gatorades anymore. I remember they used to make the big mouth Gatorades, and you can actually, it was a lot easier to aim. So
that's why you got to use the Arizona jugs. They still got the wide mouth, so it's perfect. You ain't got no splash or mess.
Well, I bought a thing from a camp store, and it's a big red bottle, and it's for both women and men, and it fits perfectly. It's made strictly for camping. So if you don't want to get out of your tent, or you live in an RV that doesn't have a bathroom, you can use this bottle, but the bottle will fit. I bought it like a couple of years ago, but I didn't have it with me in Wisconsin. So what I did is I had one of those inflatable LED lights. You blow them up and they look like a can, probably no bigger than a can, a coffee can. Yeah. And it has LED lights on the bottom of it in a circle, and you inflate it, you blow it up. And I had that hanging from in the corner of my tent. And so I had to do my duty. I had to go to the bathroom. So I just reached over, sat up, turned the light on, and then grabbed the Gatorade bottle, and I filled it up as much as I could, put the cap on it, set it down, reached over, shut the light off, laid down on my right shoulder. So one of the guys asked me what I was doing before. I said I was doing this. And they say, well, after you, put the lid on the bottle and then took the light out, and how long after you laid down on your right shoulder did this happen? I said like 10, not even 10 seconds. So that gave me the impression this thing had been watching all the tents and probably been walking around. And all of a sudden they see this little tent. And it was funny because all the guys commented at it about my tent. They're going, oh, the Bigfoot probably thought you were a kid because you had the small little 1-man tent. Everybody else had 3-man, 4-man tents. And they just, and they said, yeah, he probably picked on you because they thought, oh yeah, that little tent, that guy's not a threat. And I'm not a threat anyhow. I'm not aggressive toward Bigfoot, not unless my life's at risk. Then of course I'll try to survive that. I'll use, extreme, violence of, to live, to ensure that I live. But
Seems like the best bet you have when you come up to one of those encounters. And what I've heard from at least one other story is the whole thing. You got to try to get him to eat some of your chewing tobacco, because then at least you can get him to stagger for a second and you can run. Because if you take a shot at these things, most of the time it doesn't work that well for you. So
No, it's
you got to get him to eat some chewing tobacco.
if I was in imminent danger and I was worried about, they actually were trying to get a hold of me to do some damage, tear me apart, whatever. I've heard where they pinch people head off. All the stories from a lot of various people that a guy that got his head pinched off in southern Colorado when he was, I think, hunting elk.
I'd never heard that story before.
Yeah, Kumbo Baker talks about it. And I remember when this happened, it was at the time, I think it was in the 80s, and it was when I was living in New Mexico. And you just go from Santa Fe, or I should say, that northeastern part of the state, you cross into Colorado and you're in San Juan Valley in one part, and then on the further western part of the southern Colorado, you got the Cochise grasslands, which are beautiful. But you've got the San Juan Valley, which is part of the Southern Rockies. That area is known for disappearances and strange crap it's going on. It's very similar to things going on in that I'm trying to think of the triangle they have out in the southeast, or it would be in the east. Was
it Bridgewater?
It's a Bridgewater triangle. I think it is. It's where they have incidents of little people, UFOs, Bigfoot, all sorts of strange stuff.
And stuff like that specifically. It's up near Bridgewater Triangle. Yeah, if that's what we're talking about, like New England Triangle.
Yeah, it's right. It's in. I think it's like part of Virginia, North or South Carolina. It's sort of in that area. It encompasses. It might even be Eastern Ohio. I'm not sure, but I've been through it. I've driven past it. Maybe not through it, but I think it is a Bridgewater.
Just for the sake of bringing it up, if you want to see it, I got it up on screen just to see if this is the one you're talking about. Is this the one right here? Looks like it's.
Yes, I believe that's it. Yep. I mean, there's so many. There's also the Alaskan Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. Yeah, I believe.
Lake Michigan Triangle is another one. Yeah, that one's near Massachusetts if you're talking about Bridgewater. But yeah,
there's also one in Texas now. I don't know what they named it. If it's like a cryptid triangle.
Wasn't it the Dogman Triangle? That was that's the one that they were trying to token, right?
Yeah, there was there's one in Texas. I believe it's along it's a series of trees that come down from, I believe it goes all the way up even into Oklahoma, but it's an old forested area. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's they renamed it. It's a triangle of occurrences, cryptids, and all these other things that occur. Now I have to obviously state that some of this stuff, the stories go back hundreds of years. So with the repeatability of all these encounters still occurring, there's also so many triangles. I think there's a false equivalency compared to the actual triangle. I think it started with Richard Berlit's story, the Bermuda Triangle, and then everybody started finding. There are some substantially, I'd say, provable disappearances in some of these triangles, but I guess it's up to the observer and the person reading the books to determine, the validity of that. Because I'm a detective. If I read it in a book and to me it's a third person type situation where it's being related to you, I can't put a lot of, it's interesting, but again, it's still a story to me until I go out there and prove it to myself. It's just another story. And like you, I've heard literally thousands of these stories, not just cryptid, but of every paranormal thing you can think of. And, I had one friend of mine say, he says, maybe we need something like really so strange and beyond reality that it shakes up the world. And I go, like what? He goes, like Dogman riding a unicorn being held on to, his tail being held on to by Bigfoot as it goes over you or something like that. And I was like, yeah, that would be because you got, people are, I don't know. I mean, I look at the benefit of talking to a person firsthand who's had the encounter, but when you get to, well, it's my uncle and he had this encounter in 1948 and he passed, and now his wife is still alive. She told me the story. It's very hard to track down. Imagine being an actual detective working to prove, a case in court to get evidence, and that's what you came up with.
I mean, you can have like a first person hand to hand encounter talking to somebody specifically, and you still wouldn't be able to prove it in court to a lot of people. Because a lot of this stuff, I mean, it falls into a weird spot where it's just like everybody that doesn't want to believe it is going to look for any possible reason to not believe it.
Yeah. And I understand that. I don't mind allowing people to have a way out. If I walked up to somebody and says, hey, this happened to me personally, based on the story of me being pushed, and I took it to the next level and said, you don't realize what you're dealing with. You're going out camping in some of these parks and these creatures are walking right up to your tent. You want to risk the life of your children. If I laid it out to people like that, they would either call me a kook, and they themselves, because of what I told them, couldn't handle the information, might go a little crazy themselves. They might go a little insane because they'd have to readjust their worldview. And that actually, in some cases, changing a worldview that dramatically, I've heard where people, they got into heavy drinking, and in some cases you wonder if they destroyed their life. So I look at it, if you're going to watch this stuff, be prepared to talk to the people firsthand if you really want to know the truth. But nobody's doing that because, hey, it's the United States. We have more important things to do. We got, we've been captured basically by how the state is run. So by the time you have time in your life to do the research or the detective work you want to do, you're old, and you just don't have the ability or physicality to do it. But I did it when I was working, and I kept it a secret for 30 years from my family and all my coworkers for even longer than that. I never told them I was doing Bigfoot. What do you do with your weekends? I said, I do nature photography, because I wasn't lying, but it's part of nature. And I had to tell an IDNR, two guys from the IDNR came in and found us in the field with, and that's why I want to keep the group small. I had two women with me and a man, and the women were getting loud, and they were talking about things women normally talk about, their last doctor's visit, how their daughter's wedding went, all this kind of stuff in the field. It taught me a lot about human psyche, the human psyche, and what people are. So you sort of have to vet people before you take them out. So I had 3 people with me, and one was an ex-Leo, a retired officer, and the other 2, one of the girls was also retired, an ex-police officer, and the other woman was, but they're all into Bigfoot research. We got them out in the field. We were 200 yards, 300 yards at least away from the parking lot. We had an IDNR truck pull up into the parking lot next to me, and they trekked in and they found us. And I asked him, I said, how did you find us in this forest preserve? He said, well, we could hear the ladies talking. And I said, son of a gun, so that changed how I do research. So that was a group of, there was, counting me, it was 4 of us. After that, it was like 3 people, 2 people and me, or sometimes just one other person's. And more often than not, just me by myself. But I said, oh, and then the first question he asked me, what are you doing back here? And I held my camera up. I go, I'm a nature photographer. And everybody else had, I had, cell phones. They were recording with their cell phone. He goes, so you're out here, you're just recording nature? Yeah, I like nature. I like the birds, the cardinals are coming out. I'm a big, enthusiast. I like to know the names of birds, and hopefully I might find a pileated woodpecker if I get lucky and prove they exist in this area. So he goes, okay. He saw I was just checking to make sure you weren't collecting sheds. And I hadn't hunted deer for a long time, since I was probably your age or younger. And I forgot what that was, the term they use for antlers. They call them sheds, meaning they've been shed, He goes, I'm just making sure you're not collecting sheds. And I go, what's a shed? He goes, well, they're deer antlers that have fallen off. They're on the ground. He says, in most of your parks in Illinois, you can't collect them and take them home. I go, oh, I didn't know that. And then one of the girls in the group says to him, well, you want to know what we're really here for? And she told him, and I was like, he was like, oh, he acted like, I'm not going to react to this. I'm just going to do my job and leave. So he knew.
Didn't
and
see nothing here.
Yeah. Afterwards, I told her, I says, yeah, don't. I says, do you trust the government? She goes, no. She says, I don't trust the feds or states. I said, but you trust the state DNR officials, huh? You told them. I said, yeah. And so, of course, that's how you sort of determine the people that are with you. Now, if they're DNR people or people that are, U.S. Department of Agriculture or U.S. Forestry workers or federal wardens that work for the, Fish and Game, if they're willing to talk about it, you sort of can tell because they'll sort of bring up the subject. Then I'll engage them, but I won't just like surrender and say, hey, I'm out here researching Bigfoot. Yeah, you may not believe them, but I found prints here. And yeah, she told them all that. I was like, oh my God.
It's kind of surprising once you start talking to those people too, how many actually spend all that time out there and they do believe in it. It's like you have the people that hard just will not talk about it, and then the other ones will kind of hint at it, and then the other ones are open about it. But it seems like the majority are in the camp of believing that there is something out there. And again, that I feel like shows some validity to it, that the people that are literally spending their time out there doing that for a living, put validity into it,
Yeah, some of them will actually engage. I haven't found that person yet. I find when they're retired, they'll definitely engage and talk about all the stuff they have come across when they're in there marking trees for cut down and clothing trails, doing maintenance, checking on the crews, doing the maintenance on the trails, making sure they're all safe, checking for going to the fire outlooks, looking for possibilities of people camping and burning, doing ground fires when they're not supposed. But they're doing all that. And I find sometimes also the guys that are approaching retirement, they'll zip their lips too, because they don't want to give, their supervisors an opportunity to deny them retirement and terminate them early. So they're like sticking to they're being very careful toward retirement because again, they're working for basically most of your federal employees that are working in like national parks, national monument areas. They work for U.S. Forestry Service, which is part of the USDA, which is run by the Bureau of Land Management, which is, guess what, run by the Interior, Department of the Interior. So knowing this, you're working for the feds all the way up. And if they want to put a gag order and the supervisors tell you, yeah, anybody asks you about Bigfoot, you know nothing, you don't know what they're talking. Oh, yeah, we have wolves, we have cougars. That's probably which they always have a pat answer. So
random animal attacks when there's something seen in an area. I mean, that's a typical.
Yeah. Or they'll tell you it's I even had heard about them talking about telling people they're feral dogs. People have dropped their dogs off and they're feral and they just survive and I know those feral dogs do exist. I've come across them. But yet I come to the understanding that if they approach me and the guy's open and he's somewhat young, generally they maybe don't understand or maybe they haven't read their policy manual, so they don't know all the ins and outs. So they'll freely talk to you about it, but trying to find that person, I haven't found that person yet here in Illinois. But I think if you go out west and you're in places like Utah, Arizona, even Northern California, I think you get some people that it's so obvious there, and it's even the residents have all had interactions or some form of encounter with Bigfoot that they're used to it. They're like, they'll talk openly about it.
That side of the country is kind of totally different with that stuff. Like we have just as many sightings over here as they do over there. But on that side of the country, it's like they're either open about it or they just don't talk about it at all. But the people that don't talk about it at all are still open to it. They just don't want to acknowledge it. So it's just, there's not like a question of if they exist out there. It's a matter of like, who do you know who's seen one out there?
Yes. And that's quite a lot of people. The people that acknowledge their existence but don't want to talk about it I understand they hold their privacy very important to themselves, and they don't want other Bigfoot researchers showing up at their homestead or wherever they're living and saying, hey, can we check your property? Or can we, they want to avoid all that. And so I pretty much don't have to deal with that, because a lot of the private landowners I know already, or the public lands, which are our parks and stuff, I can go in freely and do research, until they come up with some kind of law, which I don't think will ever exist, that you can't bring recording equipment, audio or video into a park. Until that happens, you can go into any park and record.
As soon as you see that, that's going to be the park to try to sneak some cameras in and go record in. I mean, that's almost like putting a giant bullseye on that park's back.
Yeah, when you hear that, when they say no audio record, no audio equipment, no recording equipment, I'm like, well then, we're not in China yet. We're not to that point. We're not in China. And I'm sure I could expect that in China, where they clamp down on what's considered, well, you take your video and make it public. So to avoid that, they don't allow cameras or audio recording in the CCP and areas like that. That would be considered a public land, or the equivalent. But I find that I've even been approached by DNR. They found the second time they found me in the field. It's only been 2 times in my life DNR ever approached me. Was when they heard the girls talking and they walked in a few hundred yards to find us, and they were cool. Okay, we'll have fun, and they left. After they found I wasn't stealing sheds, and I even told them, I want to, show you my backpack. My backpack's small. You couldn't put an antler shed in there. Even if it only had 1 or 2 points on it. So I was like, later on, I'm thinking to myself, from now on, I'll keep the group smaller. And then I went to a state park, a different state park, and it had these signs they put up, no hiking beyond this point. I'm sure you have encountered it in your local parks, where they shut down certain hiking trails for it rained, it's dangerous, it's close to a cliff, or it's muddy. They don't want you going in there. So they had this trail that was open for a long time. All of a sudden I come up on it, and it sort of winds off the main trail. Right there, they had a sign, no hiking beyond this spot. So I figured, okay, I can come up with a pretty good explanation if I get stopped why I'm bushwhacking, why I'm off trail. I'll just tell them that I went further west down this trail, got into the area where they were deer hunting in this area where they have a lot of it's the creek bed goes through there, and it's a grove of trees where you always see deer in. And I thought I could actually go that direction, come back and return to the main park trailhead, which would put me on the other side of the sign, and tell the officer if I get stopped. Well, there was no signage coming back. I took a long way back, and you had no signage saying you can't approach this area, which was behind this no hiking sign. There was nothing there, no signage. So that was my explanation if I got stopped. It's always good to have a game plan. And sure enough, why I figured out what I was going to do. I got to the park, took off, went behind that sign, and went down to the cliffs and hiked along the cliffs. And at some point, I heard a vehicle pull up into the parking lot above the cliffs where I had descended the hills down to. And I'm thinking, boy, nobody's park's way over there, because once you pull past the parking lot, there's a trail that comes up to basically it's a deck with those I guess you'd call them telescopes that the parks put up. They're free, but you can look through them and you can scan. They pulled up to there, and I'm thinking to myself, they must know I'm down there because I was the only other vehicle in that parking lot. So they figured I'd be on any of these trails. Well, they must have taken out, I'm going to say they pulled out a thermal. That's the only way they could have found me. Night vision wouldn't have revealed anything. So they had thermal. It was still, thermal works during daylight. A lot of people don't know that. You just look for something that's warmer than anything around it. And so I thought the only way they're going to find me that I'm down here below in the bottoms here by the cliff is if they're damn near standing on that deck looking down downrange with this thermal to find me, and I think they saw the top of my head. I'm assuming all this. So I thought I'll just get to that other side of the sign, in which you go uphill and you're on the back side of the sign, and maybe I can get to the other side of the sign before they see me. Well, I heard him walking down the trail toward where that sign is. Right as I got above the foothill, halfway up the hill, he comes to the rise of the hill, signs behind him, and he yells down, "What are you doing down there?" I said, "I'm hiking." He said, "Well, you're not supposed to be down here off trail." Now, what everybody tells you, yeah, that's public land, our taxes pay for it. We should be able to do what we want, but obviously they have to have some kind of structure and framework to prevent people from falling off cliffs and stuff like that. So I understand why they put these signs up, no hiking. So I came up and I said, yeah, I gave him my game plan. I said, yeah, I walked way down there first and came around from the creek bed, which descends down toward this top of this cliff face. And I said, rather than go back the way I come, I knew the parking lot was just, up from this cliff face, up the hill and just up to that sidewalk, and right there's a parking lot. I said, I wanted to come back. I didn't want to go all the way back and add another mile to my hike. I said I was right here. He goes, "Oh, so you're saying that you just basically came back a different way?" And I go, "Yeah." I said, "I found myself behind the sign. It was never my intention to break the law." And the guy says to me, he says, "You look familiar." And then I realized, wait a second, that was the guy that was with his trainee probably 5-6 months earlier, and heard the girls talking and found us. Yeah, that's the only two times in my life. That's the only in 40 years of research. I've only been approached by DNR twice in the field, and that was in Illinois, nowhere else. Not in Wisconsin. I've been in Canada. I've been to New Mexico doing research, Southern California. My research took me all over the United States. Never did I run into Fish and Game, DNR, or their equivalent. I never ran into him. Illinois, same guy. He's like, "You look familiar." Well, I had a different jacket on, and I wasn't holding my monopod with a camera on it. So I just walked up, and I was just walking like a normal hiker, no backpack or nothing. But I did have a camera, GoPro, I think, in my pocket. So he just asked me, he says, "You look familiar." And I looked at him and I go, "Yeah, you do too." So I think I got this guy thinking, oh, it's probably at, the fireman's ball or some kind of public event. Maybe I was, I was at Pioneer Days or whatever, every city has their little gathering, and that's where I saw him. It's probably what I got him thinking. And he's like, "Well, just next time, try to stay on the trail." And walked away. And I'm thinking to myself, it's pretty sad when you can't even bushwhack because they're afraid that you're going to get poison ivy and sue the state. They're so afraid that you're going to take advantage of and I know there are people out there who are going, "Oh, I fell. I got off this trail. They didn't mark it, those no good state officials, and I fell and hurt myself. And so now I'm going to chase the ambulance. I'm going to sue these guys." So this is, I believe, what the state's avoiding, but it's also overreach. It's obvious example of government overreach. You're like, that trail was travelable. Now you shut it, and you're telling me we don't know why we shut the trail. We just posted it. We don't want people going down there above the cliff face. And I'm thinking, well, then how are you going to solve that problem in a place like Grand Canyon, where people have fell to their death? They put fencing even up, steel.
You got to put up the at your own risk signs at a certain point, and just, the ones that something happens to. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. Maybe you shouldn't have gotten that close to the edge.
And I've seen my wife went there, and her, well, she didn't go that trip, but you know how you have your senior trip in high school. Her senior trip was their senior class was gonna. They were gonna bust them out to the Grand Canyon, and she never went. But one of her classmates, and they had all marked, "Don't go beyond this point." You get all these precipices and overlooks that before they put all this welded tube fencing up, you could actually walk out to, And I guess when enough people died by accidentally slipping and falling to their death, they put all these barriers up with signage. Well, they still don't work because when I was there, these people were Asians, whether they were from Japan or China, but they were Asians. They climbed over the fencing, went out to the precipice where they're standing on the very edge where the cliff sort of juts out into these little buttresses. And they'd walk out to the very edge, turn around, and do a selfie. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, one of them was this girl, a real pretty girl. And Becky goes, look. And I waved. I said, hey, come back. I said, come back before, Darwin proves they were right, that. But they were doing that. They were climbing over the fencing, the barriers, and they were climbing out to the edges. And I'm thinking of the story my wife told me. We had for our senior class, one of our classmates climbed out to one of these edges of the cliff face where sort of there's a little buttress that goes out. And it reminded me, a lot of them remind me of, you remember Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, it'd run out to the edge of the buttress and try to get Wile E. Coyote to follow it. And then Wile E. Coyote would come out and the cliff would break apart and he'd fall, but Roadrunner would get away. But it would remind me of that. And I was like looking, and this woman standing with her back to this, whatever, half, 3/4 of a mile or more drop to the bottom. And she's like taking pictures of herself. And there's other people looking at her and they're trying to crawl. They're like crawling out. They're not quite on all fours, but they're basically crouched down because you only got maybe something that's 12 or 15 feet wide and it's straight down. And you don't know if this stuff is going to break apart or dislodge that you're standing on. But they're doing this. She said this guy, her classmate, did this. He slipped, fell to his death. I believe they went down. They found his body within that day because they knew where he fell to. But they had to go down with, I think, a helicopter to find him.
Yeah, I mean, two birds, one stone, man. I mean, you have to worry about, of course, people just falling into places that they're not supposed to be because you just can't trust that everybody's going to have the logic to, not climb to the edge of a rock that might potentially snap off. And then on the other side, I mean, even getting into the more Sasquatchy aspect of things or Dogman or whatever, maybe some of these areas are intentionally blocked off because they know that there's a danger if people are in that area, or they know that this is a territory for this thing. And that's when it gets into that whole like conspiracy theory. Well, I don't even know if it's necessarily conspiracy theory, but the whole idea about a lot of these state lands actually being like reservations for, some of these things because they know they exist in these areas. So they just leave the area alone. It's almost like the same. I mean, for a lot of people that may sound a little out there and crazy, but is it really any different than in Europe where they will build highways way out of the direction or way out of the way of where they're supposed to go just because they believe that this area is a fairy area? I mean,
they want
seems
to,
like it's
they
no
don't want to disturb it. Or even they did it in Greenland. They had the little people, so they had to reroute these highways because these bad luck and things were happening to the work crew on that were putting in the highway. They'd find that their compressors wouldn't work. Some of their power tools that they charged weren't working. They'd go dead. They have problems with tools missing, breaking their equipment, pneumatics, digging with these backhoes and stuff to put in the road, and hydraulic hoses breaking, just one thing after the other, until one of their one of their politicians, whether she was a mayor or the equivalent of a governor, she came in and they devised a plan to reroute the road, and all of a sudden all the problems went away. No tools missing, no broken equipment, no just strange stuff. It stopped happening. They also talk about this in Hawaii. Their little people,
the Menehune.
having the Menehune, having to reroute areas because the indigenous people in the area, saying they were receiving signs and indications from the Menehune that they were going through sacred area, and there was going to be bad mojo, bad luck happening to these people. where people have ended up getting really sick and just weird stuff happening. So my friend, a guy I used to know from Hawaii, I knew him. I was in a group on Facebook, and he told me, he says, I've seen the Menehune in my bedroom, on my bed. And he described them and everything, and they're nothing like the little people, like the pugwudgies and stuff like that.
How do you describe them, by the way? Because I've only, I think, talked to one other person who's seen these things, even though obviously everybody in Hawaii is like, yes, they are there, but it's very hard to actually come across one of these things. How do you describe it, if you remember?
He described it as their eyes were blue, a very strange blue color, and looked somewhat like you could see through the eyes. And he says their bodies were, he told me at one point he could see through their body. And he described it as being no more than, I think, 3 feet, in the area of 3 feet or less tall. And he said he saw one standing near his bed, and then in a split second, in a fraction of a second, it was on his bed, and somehow when it walked, it slowly disappeared. And I've heard this happening, with other little people. The the pugwudgies being one. There's so many different names. We have the paisas.
The
Here
Dewende
where I
one
live.
too. I feel like I hear a lot about those ones, and they kind of do the thing where they'll show up in people's bedrooms and disappear. The ones that come from like Spanish folklore.
Yeah, there's the ones up in the mountains up in it's either Montana or whatever, but they called them the little what was it? It's a Spanish word. I think it means Pablito, but they actually came across a cemetery where they found hundreds of these things buried. And they said the story is that people came in and stole them, and they're probably at the Smithsonian now, hidden. But they have one I think, resident. I believe it's Montana, maybe Wyoming, who they have one in a glass jar. Probably, I'd say it's 8, maybe 10 inches tall. And it's, I'd say if there's all different races of us human beings on the planet, why not different races of little people, or giants for that matter? That's not as far flung as you think.
Just a prime example of that. Within other animals, you see subspecies that are larger variations and smaller variations. And specifically, every time I get into the whole idea about like Menehune, I always bring up the whole thing with the Indonesian like miniature elephants. That there was this island that, because it was specifically just an island, and they had to basically shrink down in size in order to be able to maintain themselves on that island, they became like a dwarf species of elephant. So, if you're looking at an island species of people, I'm sure food wasn't necessarily limited at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, who knows how many generations they may have existed in that place. But it doesn't seem like it would be completely out of question to think that there would be a smaller pocket variation of people, the same as you'd see with other animals existing in an island habitat.
Oh yeah, you're referring to Homo floresiensis, the little hobbit people that in the island lived on the island at one time of Flores, and to this day, in that part of the world, that part of Malaysia and that area of the world, little people have been spotted by the residential population to this day.
Well, you got all the stone apes and everything during Vietnam. That's another good example of them. 3-foot tall islander kind of area too. That's like their variation of Sasquatch, because I haven't really heard of any like full-size Sasquatch. It's always the stone apes.
The rock
3
apes,
to 4 foot stone apes.
Yeah, I heard about the rock apes being as tall as 5 feet, as big as us. Not like, like our Bigfoot, but still all hairy and throwing rocks, being aggressive. I look at
both sides too. I hear those. So you hear those from both sides. You hear it from the Vietnamese soldiers, and you hear it from the American soldiers.
Oh yeah, the Viet Cong and our troops going into an area because the Mekong Delta in the river is an incredible habitat. It has all these species of fish. Even that one, I believe it's a jungle. It's like more in the goat or antelope family. And they found that because of the moisture and the high amount of the high amount of moisture in water in this type of jungle habitat in Vietnam, that they encountered the deer that has like it has like gill slits on each side of its face to allow it to breathe. It's a very weird looking deer. I think Forrest Galante talked about it, but that discovery was made, I think, 15 or 20 years ago. But that's another species that probably, when they came across the bones, they said, well, this is extinct. And then they rediscovered a new species. And Forrest maintains, I believe Forrest Galante maintains it was just rediscovered. The residential people, the people that lived out in the jungle, they knew it existed and they talked about it. But obviously nobody believed it.
That's like those the tunnel spiders too. That's the other one you always hear out of like the Vietnam stories. Those like giant spiders that the tunnel rats would talk about.
Yes,
I mean, I don't know if it's folklore just because people were obviously afraid to go in the tunnels and be a tunnel rat because your success rate was like, you know, only 1 in 10 people would actually live through those situations. But I mean, regardless, I mean, giant spiders don't seem ridiculous. When you get into a jungle habitat like that, and you have all these caves that people were digging out, like, of course, you're probably going to run across giant spiders like
See, and
that.
that's what people aren't understanding after our last, I guess you'd call it last mini ice age, if you want to call it that, the younger Dryas, when it hit and destroyed all the megafauna. But people in Graham Hancock, a lot of them still admit, and I agree with that, to assume that all the megafauna was destroyed is ridiculous, because look at what we have in our basically laundry list of megafauna today. We got the lion, the rhinoceros, the elephant. We got all this megafauna that still exists. So why not giant spiders? What's the difference? They were in an area underground when the catastrophe hit. We had all these giant mudslides, instant ice age, where they find these mastodons and these megafauna killed like within seconds due to this emergence of this giant change in the landscape, the descending of these areas that are huge icebergs and giant, just monolithic amounts of ice, creating this rise in the sea levels, destruction of all the megafauna that were land creatures. And then there's other pockets across the world that many of this megafauna survived. And to this day, you can't say that was part of the destruction of the megafauna until you have bones to prove that they existed at one time. But just like the coelacanth, they can't 100% prove those animals don't exist. You know, they discovered the coelacanth, and they're still sticking to the old, I guess you'd say, way they teach biology in universities nowadays, that all these animals that they claim are extinct as a result of a guy going in with a couple scientists from the Academy of Sciences out of Britain and going to Africa and saying, okay, we spent so many weeks here. Okay, this creature doesn't exist because we haven't seen it, even though all the natives are going, oh yeah, we see that every so many months. We have accounts of it. They even draw down descriptions that match what they're looking for. So to me, it's not that highly doubtful that something like the Loch Ness Monster
I was just about to say with the Loch Ness Monster too. You see this plesiosaur trope in so many different places. Like almost every giant lake has had some type of sighting of it. And it's not like people are creating all these different variations of sea monsters and different creatures. Like they seem to all be around the same shape, the same motif. Even people that have had no idea or context of like Loch Ness Monster, all these other things, reporting these same things. And like at a certain point, it's like Sasquatch. It's like you can't deny it anymore when it's not something seen isolated in one area, but something that's seen all across the world in different places.
Yeah, and I think things like plesiosaurs and things like that, even like Champ, or they have Ogopogo and Lake Ogopogo. They have, when I was up in Winnipeg, they have Winnipegosis has their own lake monster, very similar to
for
Champ.
Michigan, just to throw in another one too.
Yeah. There's a lot of them, and they're. I'm thinking, and if one scientist, which sort of confirmed what I always suspected, I wonder, are these creatures all in areas that are around the same latitude, the lakes and these impoundments that they're in are approximately what are their depths? How big are they? And it seems that when they lined it up with the latitude that Loch Ness was at in Scotland, and they ran the latitude across the world, they came across Hudson Bay. They have their lake, their monster, and it intersected a lot of these lakes that are reputedly have lake monsters because they're in water that gets extremely cold and ices over during the winter, and it goes at incredible depths. And some of these lakes are connected in some cases to Lake St. Lawrence Seaway. They're connected to the ocean. There is a Loch Ness is connected, I believe, to I want to say it's the either it's a north east Atlantic, or it could be the not the Black Sea, but the North Sea.
Yeah, I would say the
But
North
it
Sea.
connects to the North Sea, and I believe so. There is a way to get in and out of some of these lakes, but strangely enough, they're all around the same latitude where all these lake monsters exist.
Which
And
also kind of funny. That whole area was all tropical oceans, supposedly, like a really, really long time ago, millions of years ago. So when you go to like science museums and they talk about what Michigan, for example, used to look like a couple million years ago, they get into this whole thing about like they got plesiosaurs, they got this, they got that. So it's like they're already saying that these things existed in the area according to like the narrative that they're saying. So why is it not possible that, considering we barely have any of the waterways really discovered, why is it that these things can't exist in them? Not to mention the fact that we're not able to move around in these waterways as easy as we are to move on land. So, you could try to chase Loch Ness monster around Lake Loch Ness all day, but if this thing has the advantage of being an aquatic creature, it's going to be able to stay way the hell away from you before you even notice where it might even be. Same with any of
yeah,
these big lakes, like Lake Superior, all the lakes around Michigan. I don't think people realize like how massive, massive, massive these lakes are. Like these things take
yeah,
out freighters regularly because they get rogue waves and stuff. Like, what not
yeah.
a perfect
The
freshwater
stage.
area for something like that to exist?
Yeah, it's funny how Native Americans we ended up calling them. And some people refer to those what the equivalent of what I guess you would call a tidal wave or in a lake, like in Lake Michigan or Superior, they call them seiche waves because they're unpredictable. It's almost like uh, there's a movement of the tectonic plates, or there's a shifting of the magma layer at the bottom of the ocean, bottom of the lake, creates a seiche wave, and happens so immediately that you could. That's what I think happened to the Sir Edmund Fitzgerald. Gordon Lightfoot, he wrote a song, sang a song about the Sir Edmund Fitzgerald. But according to one of the vessels that was out there, they saw the Edmund Fitzgerald and from a distance on binoculars. And I believe it was within not even a minute or less than a minute, the guy looked back and it was gone. And they determined it either sunk really quick, like what could sink it that quick. That's when they came up with the explanation, or at least the theory that it could have been a seiche wave, which is like it's an event that happens so quickly. It just, this wave appears 20, 30, 40 feet high, and it just envelops the Sir Edmund Fitzgerald, and it just went down. And they said they saw a disturbance in the water, I believe, but they just didn't know what to make of it. And now the Native Americans in there around the various Great Lakes, the Algonquin-speaking people, they talk about this incredibly. They had a name for it, but it was this like a sturgeon that was like 10 times the size of a regular sturgeon, comes up to the surface of the water and does like a flip, and that creates the safe. This is the Native American account, how they had to sort of determine what makes it. So they had to make when nature's not unhappy, this I guess this sturgeon is there to like bring normalcy or harmony back, and that they considered it an omen, not a good omen. When the sage great, it was saying the sturgeon created by the Manitou, their medicine god, created this situation, but I think there's something going on geologically in all these lakes, not just with these giant plesiosaurus-like creatures, you know.
I mean, just to throw in for Lake Superior, just because I was curious and I had to look it up. Apparently, this isn't the tallest, but it's saying the tallest wave that's been recorded in Lake Superior and in some of the Great Lakes has been 46 feet tall. So that's huge. Just to throw that
Yeah.
in there. And supposedly, Lake Michigan at its deepest, or not Lake Michigan, Lake Superior at its deepest point is 1,332 feet, which is about a quarter mile. And even Lake Michigan's about 1,000 feet. So I mean,
It's
these are
incredible.
massive lakes like that. Those are like
Yeah.
inland seas at that point. And if anything, I
Superior
mean,
being, yeah, Superior
talk
is
about the
big. I think the
possibility of
biggest.
something being down there. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we don't know much about, we know 3 or 4, maybe if we're lucky, 5% of all the wildlife in the oceans.
It was like 10
Just
years
naming
ago
out,
that they
and I mean, the
discovered that
lakes are no different.
Stonehenge. Yeah, it was like 10 years ago that they discovered that Lake Michigan Stonehenge thing. That's only like,
Yeah.
it's not even that far off from the shore. And how long did it take for somebody to discover that? Like we know nothing even about these Great Lakes.
Yeah, it was, there was, their Stonehenge, and then there's a lot of, there's also some artifacts from all the copper mining done by the alleged Mycenaeans, which is just a fancy word to describe the Greeks, the Mycenaeans. And they said that they did a copper trade across the world with, well, then the known world. And they had thousands and thousands of years ago, the Mycenaeans, and probably, no doubt, the Phoenicians, the greatest, one of the greatest sailing, I guess you'd call it, to cultures in the world at that time, had already come to the or I should say North America and South America. So if the Venetians were here during the Golden Age, the Mycenaeans were no doubt great sailors. I mean, and probably were here. So you got the copper culture that existed in Michigan and the areas of the Great Lake, and they're discovering all these copper artifacts and finding these caves in mines, ancient mines, where copper was mined, thousands of years ago. We're talking about in the BC period, long before even the Vikings were here.
I saw something that they recently discovered that the Greeks, like you were kind of mentioning, actually hit North America before even the Vikings did. So it's funny, like my generation even grew up with all the Christopher Columbus stuff. And then like a couple of years after I get out of school, then it starts getting into the stuff with the Vikings. And now I just heard this like a couple months ago. Now it's going even farther back. And like I said, they're starting to discover that the Greeks were here before anybody else.
Yeah. And there's even evidence of the Chinese being here, discovering anchors off the coast of California. And these anchors were only made for these giant vessels that the Chinese, apparently used on their ship. They're these stone anchors, and they had these holes basically sculpted into them or chipped into them. But they determined what dynasty they were used in, they were in common use, and what they were doing off the coast of certain areas of California, Southern California. The Chinese were here, and they figured, well, this was way before Columbus, that they had been visiting the West Coast, even the West Coast of Canada. There's a story about even the Japanese allegedly being here, a story about among Native Indigenous people. I'm not sure if it was a Salish, but it's in British Columbia or the Yukon, these Native Americans talking about in their oral tradition, they talk about having these 2 or 3 of these Japanese sailors showing up. This was like in the days of the Shogun, and ended up they could not get back to their homeland. So they stayed with this First Nations people and lived out their life. And they have a story about it. They were like the Japanese. See, this thing about this cross-cultural connections among via trade routes have been played down by history, even U.S. geography. They don't want you to know the interactions occurred not just from Western Europe alone and some Italian getting permission from the Spanish king and queen to come here. This map has been known, the Piri-Reis map, for a long time. There were maps that preceded it. So they were circumnavigating the world. Even the Polynesians were doing it. They were going to South America. No
I was gonna
problem.
say if they figured out some where one of the main land masses is and they're like in the middle of the ocean, you can't tell me that somebody that wasn't up towards Russia or towards like Eastern Europe didn't go over into the Americas through like Alaska. That's not even that far of a gap. Like it's such a
the
weird
land
thing to
bridge.
me. Yeah, that like nobody thought of going that way. They just thought nothing existed past that, but yet there's people living in that area. Like that's so bizarre to think about. Like it makes more sense that everybody just kind of knew that everything existed and maybe forgot for a period of time and then came back around to it, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's underplayed. Nobody wants to look at that. The land bridge is, it existed for how many thousands of years before it disappeared. Oh, and also, give me a second. I want to turn my light back on.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
My light went out. You turn my light off. You turn my light off. Okay. Yeah, I'm back.
Just to throw this in there, too, just to show, like, this doesn't make any sense to me how nobody was going back and forth this way. Like, it's more logical that they were. Apparently, the tip from Alaska going into Russia is only 51 to 55 miles. So you're going to tell me that people that were seafaring didn't find that 51-mile gap way sooner than we thought they did? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the seafaring nations that we know about in ancient history that were incredible before you even get to the Portuguese. You got the Phoenicians. You've got
That's half the
allegedly
length of Lake Michigan. Like that's half the width of Lake Michigan. You're telling me nobody discovered that? Like that's crazy.
That's nothing. I mean, and even if they didn't use boats, which to me along the land bridge would be the easiest way to travel, but they could still walk it. So then, of course, you've got the influx of animals that have from Siberia that made it to the North America and into Central and even South America, having vast similarities.
I think it's just a matter of trying to hide the materials, if anything. I mean, of course, anybody that's in power, like if you discover that there's this giant area where it's just a giant stockpile of precious metals and everything, I don't think it's that nobody knew it was there. It was a matter that anybody that knew it was there kept it a secret, because why would you want to tell anybody else where your giant stockpile is?
Well, even with the Mycenaeans and those people, the people that lived on Crete, all those that have access to that extent, it was, when they were talking about the Copper Bronze Age, it's a golden age of Greece, and they're finding like this stuff that dates back to this epoch when they believe this the archaeology that supports it. I would say fringe archaeology, because you're not going to hear general run-of-the-mill archaeologists say, oh yeah, there was Mycenaean culture, Greek culture right up here in Michigan, and there's a derivation, and those stories are told by later Native Americans who relayed those stories because they had contact obviously with their ancestors too. So like where I was at a week ago, I was at the effigy mounds all over northeastern Iowa and parts of western Wisconsin. Every park I went into, I went to Effigy Mounds National Monument, and I thought, okay, there's effigies mounds there. They're mounds. To say these mounds are small, yes, they're small. If for one person, that person's got to be big. He's got to be a giant. But the mounds are, they'll have these mounds at effigy mounds, and they'll have them laid out. You have a mound and a mound next to it, and they'll go on, and you'll have 15 or 14 mounds, and they take the shape of a bear, but the mound itself is just a big round circular hill, perfectly shaped. And you're going, is that a whole family of Native Americans, their ancestors? You can't walk on them. They're going to eventually do archaeology on them. They don't want you digging on them. They don't want getting any artifacts. They're hiding it. And so when I left Effigy Mounds National Monument, I thought, well, I'll just go over to a famous park where I've had a famous forested area where I've had interactions at. But I had my wife with me, so we couldn't go bushwhacking or deep hiking in. So we took a trail when we were there. and they have them there in this forest, not far from from the mounds we went to, the FG Mounds. And then we went to another state park referred to as Pikes Peak State Park, south of where we stayed. And sure enough, they don't advertise mounds being there or anything. You get into the park, you start walking down one of the more common trails, and they have it marked off. They'll have a sign right next to where you're walking saying, don't walk on the mound. And I look over, and they'll have, like somebody went in there with a lawnmower and cut a path all the way around each mound so you could walk around it. But the mound itself is just covered with grass and prairie grass, and you're looking at it and you're going, wow, that's pretty big. That would have to be, if it's one person, it'd have to be incredible. Of course, you got to use common sense and say maybe it's a burial for that community or part of that community. That one mound may hold 25 bodies. You don't know. But they won't let anybody find out, if you got caught going in there with GPR or some kind of, ground penetrating rate or something like that to find out what's under there. They probably whisk you away, probably arrest you. But they tell you can't. They don't mind you filming the mounds, but you can't approach them. And I've been known to. I went into one area where they had a fence around, a chain link fence. It was like a 6-foot fence all the way around this mound. This is in another part of, I believe it was in northern Illinois or Iowa. But I went in there, and my wife goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I just want to get closer." So I crawled up over the fence, and I walked in. And they had an area mapped out with, they had basically string, and they had it basically laid out in a grid pattern where they had started digging already. And I didn't expect to walk. That was like on the other side of the mountain, hidden from your path. You couldn't see it. I'm like, why are they fencing this off? Well, they were in the midst of archaeology. So I was lucky I didn't get arrested. But see, these are all universities that they're hiring to come in. And the universities, based on whatever the NDA is with the state or the federal government is, they don't disclose any of that. When it finally gets to the point where it's in a museum where you can see it, those are the artifacts that have been filtered out to allow the public to see. Yep. All the other stuff, if you saw, like, you're not going to see, the cranial skull of a giant that's twice the size of your head. They don't, you don't see any of that. And the people don't know the Smithsonian is a government owned and run institution. It's not just some museum.
Yep. Do you want to see something super duper weird? So I was driving home from family's house a little bit farther north in Michigan. And on the way back down, I'd never heard of this park as many times as I'd lived in Michigan, but it's called Senilac Petroglyph State Park, right? So I start looking at these pictures of these petroglyphs that exist in that park. And this is the very first thing that I saw. I want to bring it up in a picture because I want to get your eyes on this one too. See this handprint right here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 fingers right there.
Yes.
And this is literally like, you can go there, you can see it. Like, I want to actually go there and see it myself. But I started looking at all these pictures and I started trying to dissect them. And I found at least 3 or 4 spots on this spot in Michigan that has 6-fingered handprints. Like, again, what is the motif of that? That's the typical giant things. Like, I'm surprised that this park isn't covered up unless it's one of those things that most people don't connect the 6 fingerprints. But I don't know. Look at that. I mean, unless I'm looking at it wrong, I count a thumb, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fingers.
Yeah. You have a thumb and 5 fingers. So yeah, you have 6 fingers. Yeah, and I see that in petroglyphs. When I lived in New Mexico, I visited some of the places where they had petroglyphs basically in some of the displays at various museums, the pictures of the petroglyphs. But I've actually seen some of these petroglyphs when I was in New Mexico, and they do have them in Arizona, where one of them is called, I believe, newspaper rock, and the older glyphs on newspaper rock show 6-finger handprints and some very unusual alien-looking beings or whatever, Native Americans wearing strange outfits, because I don't know what to make of it, other than I have to go back to the information regarding what I know, what Billy Meyer has discussed and talked about it. And he talked about in the days of old, there were giants and there were different types of giants. And they go on to explain that they were all not the same. And so that tells me right there, some apparently had 5 fingers and some had 6 fingers. Some were incredibly tall. He talks about 28 to 33 foot tall giants. He refers to them as more like titans. And then there was the men of renown, which were probably on the order of Goliath-sized giants like Hercules, Perseus, all these people that were 9 to 10 feet tall. Another one that a lot of people don't want to recognize, people that read the Bible, if you read one of the oldest versions of the Bible that exists, that hasn't been translated 500 times, they talk about the correct name of Noah, and it's not Noah. It's Noah something. It's a very long, it's like 32 letters in this name, and said that he was over 3 meters tall. Well, you're approaching 10 feet now.
And they said that he lived to be, what was it? It was like a couple hundred years old, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Noah. Yeah, he was actually he was a giant, and he was a progenitor. His children were giants too.
950, according to the Bible. Yeah. Noah was 950 years old.
Yeah, I mean, that's not far-fetched. If you knew our true lifespan was anywhere from 400 to 1,000 years, and that we're living with, it probably will sound like conspiracy to some people, but I've done a deep dive in this, and I believe we are genetically manipulated people. All the races on this planet, all 5 races on this planet have been genetically manipulated to keep us under 100 years old. And there's a reason for that. You look at the news cycle, we forget stuff that's 1 to 2 weeks old. You forget it happens. Sometimes we forget. Well, think about a generation. The average generation lives, even give them, I guess I could say to be beneficial about it, I could say some people live into their 90s and hundreds. They're outliers, but on average, people live to their 60s and 70s more often than not. And then there's a minority of people that make it into their 80s and 90s. Well, if you look at that and you're going, the reason for that is if our progenitors, the people that created the manipulated gene, wanted to use us, enslave us, and use us as their warriors, they're the people that they're the enslaved became their warriors, their protectors, and basically only could live up to 100 years. You could never form a movement. You can never form any kind of situation where you could free yourself from your bondage, because you have a short lifespan, and what happens is you end up being I guess the word is amnesia. You have this like amnesia. I call it what's happening to the species now of humans on this planet. I think we have also a genetic amnesia.
I mean, you basically are tricked into working until you get to a point where you've kind of degraded. And then once you get to that point where you've degraded, they're like, all right, have fun. And you get about, 10, 15 years. And at that point, it's like your brain is so fried from all the time that you spend working that it continues on the cycle that you're really never able to climb into anywhere new, discover really any of these new things, because you spend so much of your time just focused on your work. And then when you get to a point where you can focus on your own work and research, then you're just getting too tired at that point to be able to do it. And you don't have that same energy you did that you spent all that energy on somebody else's dream at that point. So like I said, it's a vicious cycle that's intended that they work you when they can, and then you have a short period where you're not being worked, and that's the whole intention is, you just want to kick off the extra.
And it's sort of funny. The reason why they do that is because when you reach that age where you're supposed to retire, you're really, if you're in any kind of trade where it involves any kind of physicality, you're useless. So they basically, you're being put out to pasture. Now, envision this, what you just touched on. Imagine with people could spend their entire lives, they contributed to the whole, let's say your average work, you worked 4 hours a week to contribute to the community at large. And everybody in the community did this. And you had what I call a direct democracy, not a representative democracy. You voted on petitions. You didn't vote on people, you voted on petitions. and this was all working out, and you were actually, from the day you were born until the day you died, you spent the majority of your time, except for the 4 hours you worked a week, you spent the majority of time on art, music, all these other things that inspire you to make you a better person. What you're technically doing there, or what you effectively are doing, is you're evolving your consciousness. It's an evolution of your consciousness. The way we live in this vicious cycle nowadays in the West is we're not allowed to evolve our consciousness, because that would mean you would spend most of your waking time doing not just the self work, but you would be uplifting the consciousness by, through you and everybody else doing this, the consciousness of the planet. And to me, that we have a ways to go to get there. And unfortunately, because of a representative democracy, you're voting on people who keep promises, which is, to me, the most absurd criminal thing you could do. You know, it's
And
like
most
me
of those
walking
people
into the
that you
bank
vote
and,
for know nothing of the common man. They don't even live in the state that they're representing anymore. So it's just like they're strictly speaking because they want to be somebody that's in charge, rather than most of the time actually trying to make a difference. Because again, like when you're one of these politicians that's been raised in these families where you just have endless amounts of money, everything's handed to you on a golden platter, like how can you relate with the common man? Like you see these
no, you
things with
can't.
like Hillary Clinton and all these politicians where they go into like a normal person's house and they look like they're just absolutely disgusted by it. And it's like, these are the people that are representing us. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's sad. It's that way because we've equivocated the worth or value of a person by how many assets they have and what they're worth, what their physical worth is monetarily, what they've achieved, and all the good works which they publicize. Really good works or helping your fellow human. That should just be the normal thing to do, and nobody should even share that, hey, I did this for so and so, or I did that. Politicians, people in the entertainment field, they all just want to put that out there. Even Keanu Reeves, I don't know if he appreciates it or not, but all these people saying Keanu did all these nice things for people, blah, blah, blah. If he's a true human being, he probably doesn't appreciate this shit going public. If he's just like the rest of them, the elites, he was like, yeah, the whole idea about doing great things and helping people out is nobody knows you're the one helping them, because everybody does it. It's just the human. When people say to me, why'd you do that for me? Why'd you get that for me? Or why'd you stop and help me? I tell them because it's the human thing to do. It's just a human thing. It's not, it's like we're getting away from our humanity,
Yeah.
and we don't have that anymore because we're thinking about, look who I am and look at my worth, not my worth as far as my wisdom worth or my ability to create a better place for everybody, including myself. No, they're not talking about that kind of worth. They're talking about political and economic value. That's all you have.
I mean,
As
most
far as what?
ideology today teaches so much about individualism that it forgets the point that you have to exist as a community. And even within the whole individualism idea, I mean, it teaches community within individualism. And that's where you have all these individual splits where there's not a broad community of people anymore. It's like, here's this group of people, 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 and you're trying to stick them all in the same place. Like everybody's so interested in being in that niche and being that individual, they forget that the only way anything will work is if we become a community and function all together and accept everybody for all the different things that they might be able to participate, because everybody's good at different things, but
Yeah,
everybody
and
just wants
that's
to
why
section themselves off.
we should be a collective. And I always thought this was wrong. You see it really amplified, even multiplied for that matter, on all your digital platforms, whether it be Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, or whatever, where everybody as an individual wants to start a group. So what happens is, instead of having all these groups coming together to create one big group, a worldwide group of understanding, a harmony of a population of people working together, what you have is, nowadays, I call it sectarianism.
It's like
You
millions
have
of
not just
groups of just 10.
yeah, you have sectarianism. You don't just have religious groups, you have political groups. You see it in the Bigfoot community. You have all these disassociated research groups. One doesn't want to cooperate with the other. They have antipathy for another group. They can't stand it. They're indifferent toward. So that, if people would stop the sectarianism, creating groups where you need group followers and a group leader. And everybody would say, it's even in politics. You see all the various groups that exist in the Democratic Party, all the little groups that exist in the Republican Party. And then you got groups outside that, the independents and, the green wave groups, all those groups. And that has split things apart. You saw it in the beginnings of the Catholic Church. You had all these branch off Protestant faiths all saying their way of interpreting the Bible was the best or only way. And then people splintered off those groups and created their group and said, no, our interpretation is the best. It's just, you get all this. So that's a result of individualism. They're using it as a monolith to say that's how everybody should be.
Not realizing that we all have the same root and foundations. And I mean, even going into like religion is like an example of that. Almost every single religion that's monotheistic all goes off of the Old Testament. And then there's just a split off when it comes to the Messiah concept. So it's like, again, everybody forgets whether it's Sasquatch, whether it's this, we all have the same roots. It's just those little opinions that tweak and then they make everything split. We need to go back to the foundation of everything and then be able to discuss everything according to the foundation.
Yeah, there needs to be, if you want to call it a collective, but I think that searching for that one perfect person to represent it all puts that person on a pedestal. And because human beings love, because of our psyche and the way we've been raised and the way we've, for generations, have been brought up in this world, we feel it's all right to receive this adoration and sort of look at ourselves in the mirror as being somewhat like a god. All these people are adoring us, or they're worshiping us because whatever, we hold a high political office, or we're in charge of a group that may have some kind of part of that group may have something to do with doing good things, beneficial things. But you got to do it there. It's just not. They're putting too much into these groups, and then the groups who are very similar to each other all disagree with each other, as you pointed out. And so what happens is they're saying that diversity is good. Well, diversity comes from the word division. So you really want that division, so I think this whole thing about groupthink, and we got to look to the group leader to determine what our groupthink is going to be. To me, that was around before the digital generation, and now the digital generation is here, and it's like amplified and magnified incredibly, and everybody's wanting to join all these various groups, and I was like,
there's always somebody speaking everybody's exact language on the internet now. That's part of the problem too.
They're policing that.
Whatever your idea is, whatever your ideology is, there's somebody that's speaking exactly your ideology. Even if it's a small group, there's somebody out there and you will find it.
Yeah, they're speaking your ideology, but and that's very true. But having the ability to, like, say, the virtue, even though I'm not a Christian and I'm not Catholic anymore, I can recognize the virtues. Treat your brother as you would treat yourself. All the virtues in the Bible, even without religion, you live those virtues, you're still being a good man by any stretch of the word. I think some people need religion, and I think it's a benefit to have religion because it helps you understand that the nuclear family, your children, your wife or wives, that you can still exercise those virtues within your family and in your community, whether you have a religion guiding you for it or you have enough wisdom in your life to apply it in your life around as far as your actions and what you do. You don't need, I understand people need that guidance. They got to go in church on Sunday. You have to understand what Jesus is saying to apply it in their life. I know a lot of people that do exactly that, and they're not religious at all. They hold children in high regard because they know they're going to be succeeding them in the world we leave behind, that our children hopefully will be able to be encouraged to keep things going and for the betterment of humankind and the beneficial of humankind. But also, I think that as as part of a family, a parent, you have to look at, you know, treating everybody with kindness is across the board, not just religion. It's just the human thing to do. Everybody should do that. You shouldn't need a religion to say, okay, here's the 10 commandments. You know, don't covet thy neighbor's. That's common sense. A lot of those commandments are common sense. Unless you're disposed of or you degenerate into feral humans, then you got a problem. And we're seeing this in society now where people are, they're they're basically devolving into like feral humans, and they're like, it's an eye for an eye. You know, it's like the Old Testament, which was to me like the Old West almost. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was, you know, they say, well, there were two different gods. One God was more, you know, he was more vengeful. Now the New Testament God, see, that was one of the reasons why I started looking for other religions, and I found out there were no other religions that close. There were some religions, even the ones that were polytheistic, that held those very same values and virtues as did the Abrahamic religions, but they were looked down upon because all those gods they worship, they're all tin gods. Well, what did they look at us? They'd probably say the same thing about us. We're monotheistic. That's a tin god too to them. So instead of saying my God is better than your gods or your gods are better than my God, I think everybody's missing the point. I think it's about, you know, understanding through common sense and logic what is obvious on the moral compass,
Oh yeah.
like love, cherishing your children,
Being
uh,
grateful.
being grateful, being happy and satisfied that you did something, and actually giving yourself a pat on the back occasionally and saying, man, I was going to try and do this. I don't think I'm going to be able to succeed, but I'm going to push away, push hard and try to do it. And you succeed. People should congratulate themselves. And through that, you get satisfaction. If you're waiting for your coworker, your friend, your boss, your wife, or whoever to give you that attaboy, you're not living. To me, that's not the right way to really go about living. I think it's just you have to appreciate yourself. If you become self-hateful, that basically mirrors itself to people around you, even people that are close to you. They see that if you say stuff like, I don't think I'm going to succeed, or I have doubts about my ability to do this, people pick up on that stuff right away. And they know that, you know, I always say, be hard on yourself, but don't be brutal to yourself. And,
Yeah.
and I always just say, be kind to yourself also. That's one of my words of wisdom I would have used at the end of your show.
I was gonna say you gotta always kind of meet the middle ground on things. Like you can't beat yourself up too much, but at the same time you gotta push yourself. But on the other side too, you can't become too into yourself where you almost start like self-worshiping, because then you start losing the context of having the sense of community. So just like with a lot of things, it's a matter of meeting in the middle, but a lot of people end up pushing it way too far, and then they get into this whole other spectrum that was never the intention in the first place, which is the hard part with a lot of philosophy, is
Yeah.
that you have the
And
original person that writes the philosophy. It makes sense to that generation, the people around them, when they can kind of start to expand the ideas. But once it gets a couple generations out, the philosophy starts getting reinterpreted again. And then once that's reinterpreted again, then it's a different perspective, because it's not the
yeah,
same period that the philosophy was written in. And then it kind of, people just take it off in their own direction.
yeah, it changes. And when that changes, the understanding of what their original philosophers intended are no longer make sense. They're not effective. Like even Aristotle or Socrates, uh, they, you know, they believed in moderation. With all things moderation, and you know, it's one thing to be satisfied and be good to yourself. It's one thing it's quite a different thing to go beyond that and spoil the hell out of yourself, and just make a mockery of yourself by doing that, because then you can't even look in the mirror now because you become a different person. So moderation is important. uh you know, I always wondered why uh there was that old, I don't know if they do it anymore. There was a time in China where uh people would tell me, and I'd read about it, how Chinese parents would tell their beautiful daughters that they were ugly, so they wouldn't get sort of like the Valley Girl complex like we have in our country, where girls just don't, they fawn on themselves and they think they're so beautiful, but they don't have the common sense to put two brain cells together and come up with their own original statement. The thing is I see that and I'm going, yeah, my daughter is a beautiful woman. I had people compliment me on my daughter, but I've never went up to my daughter, oh my God, you're so beautiful. I would never, I don't want to indulge in that and get her. You can get your children into a sense of, oh, my dad and my mom said this about me, so therefore I am the gift to the world type
Yep.
situation. And I've seen people do that with their children. And then when they get into the real world, they find out, oh, they're not as beautiful as their parents. They didn't sing as well in the shower as their mom told them. They actually can't sing at all. And they go out into the mainstream with these lies about themselves because parents don't want to tell the truth. And I love my kids, but I will never lie to them and say you're something that you're really not. And therefore, from that, they will tell me the truth and tell me, Dad, that's a bit much. You're over the top on this. So I've been able to check myself, even when I tell them about, hey, I saw a structure out in the field. And I see that look in their eyes and they're like, oh, here he goes again. So I don't say anything after that. I'm like, okay, I'm done. But you got to sort of recognize the limits with people. Just because you're doing something you find exciting, you want to get to the go to the rooftops and scream it to the world. It's sometimes you just got to keep the treasure to yourself and wait for people that may be interested and ask you about it. And then
Got
you
to dip
tell
the
them
toe
what
every
you know.
once in a while. Just dip the
What's
toe.
that?
Just figure out what's going on with people. I do that all the time, even with like
Yeah.
the Sasquatch stuff. Because again, Sasquatch, like we were saying, gets completely divided. You kind of got to dip the toe, feel the room, and then go from there.
Yeah. And if people come up and I dodged it for a year, I used to have, after I retired, I'd have one of my in-laws. He retired probably around the time I did. And every time we'd get to a family function, my my son-in-law's, well, it would be a stepfather, but my in-law would come up to me and, Don, I'm retired. I don't know what to do with my time. What do you do with your time off? Well, I'm not going to crack that egg and tell him everything or even a little of it. I just tell him I just enjoy photography. I do a lot of nature photography. I'm sort of like I write articles, but I says I'm always working on something. So I said I stay busy. I said I treat it as though,
I follow my
yeah,
interests. That's probably a good way of putting it, because
yeah,
that kind of universally goes for anybody. Whatever your interest is that pops up, just follow that interest at the time.
yeah. And that's why I told him, I said I like photography and I like nature. And so I says I spend times walking around taking video and pictures, and it was good enough for him. And then I ran into my wife's cousin the other day, and he's a big hunter. He says his favorite expression is, I go out and kill things. So I said, well, that's cool. And then he asked me, so what do you do? And I figured, well, he's an outdoorsman, his hunter. He's probably already familiar with Bigfoot. And I even asked him, I said, you ever watch any of the Bigfoot stuff on TV or on YouTube? Oh, yeah, I love that stuff. So then I told him what I was doing, and he was cool with it. He goes, you know what? I'm going to get in contact with you. He says, you're going into the same areas I hunt in, and you're getting evidence. You're getting casts. You're getting vocalizations. He says, I thought something was going on. I could not put my finger on it. So apparently he has experiences. And he's he's the big, they call him the big hunter. He's the big guy, the big hunter in our family. And and there's people in the family that don't like he's a big hunter because that's not interesting to them. So he won't walk over them and say, yeah, I was out duck hunting, and set up a blind because he knows it. So it's the same with Bigfoot. You just use logic and common sense. And the people eventually filter through that are really interested. And those are the people I engage. And more often than not, they already know me. So it's not like a big stretch.
No, that's
You know,
the blessing and the curse of the internet at the same time, is that you can find your tribe really easy. And I mean, sometimes though, it puts you into this paradigm where it's like you get so used to talking about Sasquatch that sometimes you'll go out and talk about it normal for a minute and be like, oh, Wait, I'm not in my group at the moment. You have to reel it back in a little bit.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's like with anything else. I look at it. To me, it's even though it's exciting and adventurous. I talk to guys in my family who are guys. One guy he loves Corvettes, and he's in the Corvette club, and he's had, I'm sure, a few Corvettes he's owned in his life. The older models, and he's big into that. He wants to talk about that, but he's the same way. Once he tell everybody's acts like, oh, it's just another, a gearhead story about somebody working on their Corvette. Most people, unless they're really into that, their eyes glaze over, and then he changed the subject. And so he was telling me that one day about his Corvette club, and I was like half asleep. And finally, I had to say something. And I go, dude, and I pulled out my phone. I said, look at these pictures. And I showed him some of my structures pictures. And he goes, where'd you find them? I go, in some of the parks around here. He said, what are those? I said, that's Bigfoot structures. And then after that, he stopped talking about cars, and it was over. And it was just, I used that sort of as a conversation killer for me. And then later on, I looked back at that and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, he knows, you take the thing that most turns you on in your life, that is your favorite sport, your favorite, your sort of your sideline that you like doing when you're not working. And some people like fishing, and other people hate fishing. I've worked with guys. What do you do on your weekends? I go fishing. I hate fishing. So, to me, that's sort of how I go about it. I look at it, people, they want small doses of it or no doses of it. So you just try to not make enemies. But at the same time, when it comes to something like this, a podcast, you can't just sit on it and not share it. People have to. There's people.
It's the group to tell it to, because it's the people that actually want to hear it.
Yeah. Otherwise, they wouldn't be tuning in on your channel, because your channel has a lot of interesting stuff, metaphysical, fringe, things that were viewed as conspiracies and are now conspiracy facts. Yeah. and yet people are still in denial, even though they can prove it and the facts are out there.
Hey, it's the whole Yuri Bezmenov concept. You dilute people enough from the truth that one day you can present them the truth and they still won't believe it.
Yeah, that's very, very true. They say, and yet they'll, at the drop of a hat, believe a lie.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you've indoctrinated them into believing the lie. Yep.
Yeah, and it's sad because, and I hear that term a lot, even on the internet. Everybody, to me, it's gotten too easy to call somebody a double agent. It's just that people disagree with each other. Just because you're disagreeing with me doesn't mean you're a double agent that works for some unknown alphabet agency.
It's also just paranoia in the conspiracy community. I'm sure that there's some ones out there that maybe have some bad intentions, but just you put a bunch of people that question every single bit of authority and you put them together, you got to expect that they're definitely going to question each other's motives. I mean, that's just, that's part of the whole thing, it comes with the territory.
Everybody forgets about Occam's razor too. Usually the most easiest or common explanation is usually the most accurate one. But, if you make a conspiracy theory out of thin air that's, you believe in, even though it's made up and you have no proof or evidence, but it's a very interesting story, would be a great book or movie. But then you have somebody hears what you said and they add their 25 cents to it. And they say, well, not only is it that, but this guy and this guy and this guy, what you think is a good guy, they're also complicit because they were involved in this, and this. I have no proof of that. I'm just saying that. So what happens is sometimes actual conspiracy theories that become conspiracy fact will create or will give birth to just a bunch of false conspiracy stories by normal people in the world, because they want to take they figure, well, if mine is different than his, I'll generate interest. And it's the human nature, psyche, to want to gather followers or gather this like a contingent of people that back you and support you. And that's why I'm always think the YouTube algorithm is always pointed toward getting more followers and subscribers and viewers, where I tell people, shit, you don't have to subscribe. Hell, if you're subscribed and you don't like what I'm doing, unsubscribe. I'm trying to be realistic to people. I don't need to worry about the algorithm of YouTube prodding me to say if I do this, that, and the other, they'll promote me and I'll have hundreds, millions of followers. My intention is not to be another Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that's why with my show, I talk about what I want to talk about. And if it gets big numbers, if it doesn't get big numbers, it's irrelevant to me. It's a matter of I talk about the information I'm interested in that I want to get out to people, and anything past that. If people want to listen, they want to listen. If they don't, they don't. I mean, find another podcast, I guess,
Yeah. And I'm that way too. I feel if it doesn't interest you, just go to the next channel, go to another content creator and watch his stuff. I'm not going to adjust what I'm saying based on my own research.
I'm not going to glorify false
change that to please
stories or
people.
try to promote stuff that I know is false, anything
Yeah.
like that. And I know there's a lot of podcasters that will do that for clicks, but that's just never been my style. Like, I started my podcast on truth, and that's what I try to stick to. And it doesn't matter if, this story is going to get me 1,000 views. If it's false or I sense any falseness to it, like, I don't have an interest in it. I won't even touch it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, and I'll even, you sort of have to sort of police yourself in areas that I find I'm talking about. If I don't know, I can prove it. I'll use words like, it's alleged this occurred.
Supposedly.
And until I look into it, I won't know anymore till I look into it. And it all comes down to access. If they let you look into it or give you access to the information.
Yep.
So, and if it's freely available, that's even better. And I make my stuff freely available. I go ahead and my casts I've showed on one video. I've shown it to anybody interested. I'd show my alleged Dogman cast, my alleged Bigfoot cast. I've showed people the audio that I was able to sort of weed out of some of the background noise and sort of filter it to get the obvious vocalizations that in some cases, I accidentally found in some of my videos. I didn't know were there. When I cleaned them up and got rid of the wind and the insects, the low and the high filters, I ended up with what's left. It can only be what I consider as what's left is your answer, according to Sherlock Holmes. And that's what I come down to. It's not human. It's not these animals. And you go to the library at Oxford. It has over 12,000 recorded animal sounds across the globe. And you compare it, and when you find it's not in that archive of sounds, all that's left is Bigfoot, unless there's feral people living in the forest.
Hey, and for all we know, they might be closer related than we think,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we're at Bigfoot, based on the DNA evidence, on the matrilineal side has human DNA, and the nuclear DNA is a progenitor, an unknown male progenitor that is more ape-like. Well, who's to say that we don't have people walking around on the planet in society right now, possibly even in the city you live near, that are part Sasquatch?
Mm-hmm. I mean, even if it's maybe like an eighth or like 10%, maybe some of these people that are a bit taller and a little bit hairier, but just we don't think it as much of anything special. I mean, they could literally have like 1/8, 1/16 Sasquatch DNA. Maybe that's what starts to come out as a dominant trait.
Have you not seen people when you've been in the mall or in public where you've seen people, men, more and women too, but you'll see men that have sort of a Neanderthal look to their face?
Oh, 100%. They're usually hairier looking guys too.
And they'll have hair coming out of their sleeves and out of their shirt collars. And I always wondered about that. How do you know Bigfoot went ahead and took a woman hostage? She had the baby. The Bigfoot was already hybrid and has part human DNA in it, but maybe this particular Bigfoot had a little more human DNA in it. And it had its way with this woman. She gave birth to a human that was more human looking, Homo sapien, than Sasquatch, and grew up to be part of society, and nobody even questioned it.
Have you heard that story about It came from Russia. It was like a woman who was like an Alamasty,
Yeah,
Zana
it's Zana.
Baptisia. That's it. And
Yeah,
there was
Zana. Yeah,
actually some males from the village that had, held her
yeah.
down
They
and
had
had their way
sex.
with her.
Yeah, they
And
had their way with her.
they produced children. And the first
Yes.
couple of them that she produced, she did the thing where she tried to bring them over to the water and like put them in the water to clean them off. And she froze and killed like the first two of them that happened with. But the
Yeah,
ones
there was
after
two
that,
or
when they got
three.
it away from her, then they were able to
Yeah.
like maintain it and keep it alive. So, I mean, if theoretically Xana from Aptasia was an Alamassi, she did carry that Sasquatch DNA. I mean, there might be some proof right there that these two species are able to commingle and reproduce
Well,
together. I
have
mean,
you seen the actual pictures of Zana?
yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, she's very ape-like in appearance, but unlike
Even
a
her sons
gorilla.
too. They're very hairy,
Yeah,
but they look like
yeah.
taller,
Quid.
bigger people.
Yeah, Quid was one of her sons, and he was like, what did they say, 7'2" or whatever? Yeah, but he was super strong. He walked over to this huge table. It was like it was in a big, this big house, and they were having some kind of gathering. So it was this huge, like a table that would seat 20 people, made out of wood or oak or whatever. And he walked over and he grabbed the leg of one of the four legs of the table. It was a huge table, and he just lifted the whole table up. He had these like feats of strength. They thought he was like Hercules, and he had common sense. He did well in school. He his learning capacity was not affected. Yep, there he is.
Just to bring him up, yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, that's Xana, right?
No, no, that's I think his sister or his daughter.
Because you
I
always
don't
get
think.
these pictures, and these ones
Yeah,
are clearly
yeah.
false.
There's
But
Anna. She's the one with the nose looks weird, sort of weird. But that's Anna. And Melba Ketchum told me that she went over. I thought she went to Russia, and they couldn't find the bones of Zana, but they found the bones of Quid, and they were able to whether or not they sequenced his DNA. I wonder, but his skeleton was abnormal compared. Well, you can see him right there in the picture on the right of what appears to be, I think, his sister. And they said he was huge. He had very abnormal. His appearance was not what the men looked like in that community. He was different, but he was very strong, and they said he could withstand cold temperatures better than most humans. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting ones. And the ones that I've seen by there's this artist who does great artwork based on forensic descriptions. And the majority of her art that I've seen, if not all of it, almost every depiction of Bigfoot she has drawn has a human-like face. And they vary, just like human faces in our own population of Homo
that's how
sapiens.
all the First Nations usually describe them. Is when people have like the more updated drawings, people tend to do these beards on them, like all these different looks, and it's kind of like a Caucasian-y looking face, which maybe that may have happened along the line with the DNA. But all the First Nations people that you talk to, when they refer to Sasquatch, they talk about him basically the same way that like native faces are. That they said there's no hair on the face at all. It starts at the head and kind of goes up around. There's no beard. Like every First Nation person I've ever talked to specifically verifies that Bigfoot, Sasquatch, there's no beard. They're straight, bare, naked face.
Yeah, most of them are like that. There are some exceptions. Some have. I think it's not they have manicured goatees. The hair just emerges in spots where their chin is, and other spots they don't have like sideburns. It's just the interesting thing is in these depictions, there's a whole range of when people think, well, Bigfoot is a hybrid creature. It's hybridized with our ancestors, or I should say, Homo sapiens. Usually women are being taken, and they're not just Native Americans or Native Indigenous from Central or South America. They're also some have Asian appearances, some look like black people. They have facial appearances like Africans, Asians, Caucasians, Native American. The one my one friend saw in Wisconsin, across the creek from him, he was pretty big. He stood there and looked at him. I asked him, I said, what did he look like? He said his face looked Native American. He looked indigenous. I've seen others, people describe the ones they saw as looked Caucasoid, looked like a white man's face. The one Randy told me about that he saw, they were out in their pickups with their chainsaws, cutting down wood and collecting wood to take home and cut up and split. And he says there were 2 or 3 young guys with him with the chainsaws. I think Randy was with them. He says they look up and there's a Bigfoot walking through the side of the mountain they were on, came out of the trees and was like walking parallel to them where they were on the road. He says, and it got closer, and he said he looked up at it, and he said he says it was a very handsome face, very handsome, manly looking face. And I asked, well, in his interview, he was asked, and I had talked to him about it too, but in the interview, he was asked about it, and he described it as, they said, well, could you describe it like, you said it looked like a man's face, like a Caucasian man's? And he goes, yes, not Indian. He goes, well, who did you think of when you looked at it? Who did it resemble? And the guy that played Iron Man, that's who he described.
Oh, Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey, yeah. He said he looked like Robert Downey Jr. And the people sort of laughed. They said, really? He goes, yeah. He says, we were amazed how good looking he is, because he says in our culture, when we get together with our cousins, and he says Indians have a sense of humor just like everybody else. He says when our cousins come over, and grandma and mom's there to fucking cook up and feed everybody. He says you don't always see your cousins because everybody's somehow related, and your cousins, some of them you see a lot, some of them lived in the next in the farther away on the edge of the reservation, maybe even in another state, and you don't get to see them but maybe every couple of years. But he was telling him, he told one, he says you're fucking ugly. And his cousin, and his cousin goes, why do you call me ugly? He says, you look like fucking Squatch. And he says, and I remember him talking about that, and he says, some of us are ugly, and he says, we call a spade a spade. We say, oh, you look like Sasquatch's baby, or you look like a Sasquatch. That's an insult, because not all Sasquatch are beautiful like Robert Downey Jr. They're not handsome. But I've even heard another description. This is on a YouTube video where the guy described a female, and she was beautiful. From toe to head with hair, naked, but she stood probably, I think he said she was 6.5 to 7 feet tall, somewhere in that. But he was
that
with
on
his
Sasquatch
dog.
Chronicles? Because I remember hearing a Sasquatch Chronicles episode where the guy was talking specifically about like how beautiful her face and her body and stuff like that was. Like the
I
female
haven't saved
Sasquatch.
I haven't saved in my phone. I'll send it to you.
I swear it was Sasquatch Chronicles, maybe like 6 months ago. I'm like 99.9% sure I remember somebody talking about like a beautiful female Sasquatch on that show.
Well, this guy, he was on an interview with the girl that's a forensic artist. She's a great artist. And I don't want to be name dropping on your channel, but there's all these names, but you can look her up. It's Sketching Bigfoot is her channel. And I believe it's Sketching Bigfoot. But this guy comes onto her, is interviewed by her. What she does pre-interview, she has them give her a description, then she paints their description of Sasquatch, and then after she completes it, then she interviews them, and then she throws it up so when he describes what he saw, he has the matching art that she created from his description. It's really cool. And she knows who I am, and I know. I just never thought of contacting her. The ones I've seen, I've been on thermal, and it's hard to get a facial identification from a thermal. But in this one, he was down a trail in this forested area. I don't know if it was private land or public land, and he took his dog. And his dog went into the brush, went into the weeds, and there was some like these huge shrubs. and his dog took off, and so he heard his dog in the shrubs where he was at in this wilderness area, and it was time to leave. And he goes, and he could hear his dog messing around in the shrubs, or so he thought it was his dog. And he goes, "Okay, girl, let's go." Or he goes, come on, girl, we got to go. And I guess this creature thought he was talking to her. So she, from the other side of these shrubs, she just stood up. And in the artist depiction, I was like, without hair, I would be gawking at this lady. I'd be like, wow, check her out. But I was looking at it, but she was big. And he looked at her, and she's looking down at him because he's shorter. And he's looking at her, and he's trying to figure out, and he realized, oh, she must understand a little of what I said, like, let's go, girl. He thought she must have understood some English. And so while they're staring at each other, she's staring at him. I don't know if he said anything or he didn't know what to say, and he's looking. And she made a motion with her head like she was surprised, like, oh, I thought, oh, like you caught me. And so now they're looking at each other, and all of a sudden behind her, I believe to her left and behind her, or the left of the screen on the so it would be to this female Bigfoot's right, be on her right side behind her. This other Bigfoot stands up, which he believed was her father, who definitely was closer to the 10-foot range. He was like looking at him like, don't even think of it. Like, like a father would with his own daughter. And he got the impression like he didn't, the male didn't want him around. But the girl, the woman, whatever, female Sasquatch, she was like checking him out. Like, yeah, you surprised me, like I thought you were talking to me, or it was just weird. And then when I looked at it, I was like, I've heard this in the past where some female Bigfoots are actually somewhat attractive, and others are just like Patty.
More, they got more of the human DNA. They got more of their mother's side.
Apparently, that's what I'm thinking. They got more of the human DNA. So whoever her mother was, unless her mother was a really pretty Bigfoot too, I don't know. But I hear about that. I also heard about in this different interview by the same woman from Sketching Encounters, or Sketching Bigfoot, I believe is her channel. I'll use her name, Sibylla Irwin. She's that's her channel, her content. But Sibylla Irwin is an incredible artist. But she was the first one when I've been telling people for ages, for decades, Bigfoot are a type of people. They're an uncontacted tribe, very primitive, and still in the Stone Age. They're not an uncontacted Bronze Age or Copper Age tribe. No, they're an uncontacted tribe that probably do use stone tools, do use things like that. I think some of the more advanced ones probably do make the equivalent of arrowheads and things of that nature. So I think there's varying degrees of intelligence among these groups or families of them. But when I saw that, I was like, he even stated, he says, I had no fear when I was directly looking at her. It was more amazed by her size. And she was surprised when I called my dog. I guess she thought, maybe when he said, let's go, girl, maybe she thought that was her father saying that. I don't know. But
Speaking English, she just got excited.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder. I mean, I've been gifted. You hear about gifting?
Oh, yeah.
I've gifted, but I've been gifted back, which I got a question mark in my head when it happens. One was a turtle shell.
Ooh, I've heard that one a good number of times. It
was a really nicely clean
turtle shells.
Yeah, I went past a boulder on my trail. I'm about 3/4 of a mile from my car, walking down this trail. I pass a boulder pile in front of me. So I walked to the right of the boulder pile. And I remember looking at the boulders, and it looked like it was a two-way where people on four-wheelers or side-by-sides can drive down this. But it's only during deer season do they use it. It was spring, and I was back there, And I was like, I see the two-way, and I walked down it, walked past this boulder field uh, along it was on the road, it blocked the road, so I had to walk around it. And I came back probably less than an hour later, and one of the prominent boulders, the ones that there were like 4 or 5, I don't call them a field, but it was just a group of boulders. There was like a dozen of them, and one or two of those were really big. And on the biggest one, as I walked back, I looked down, and there's a turtle shell, totally clean, nicely clean, like it was kept somewhere. And so I don't know, like somebody had it was all cleaned up, shining, really nice. I picked it up and I just put it back down. And I didn't think about it at the time that, wow. I even in my video, I go, yeah, that was not there when I walked past here earlier, an hour ago. Now on my return, it's there. So I left, came back another day, and I walked down the trail approaching. I'm about not even a quarter of a mile from where the turtle shell was placed on the boulder. And I'm walking in, and I remember the specific spot on this trail. You could almost hear or see the river beneath there. And I walk in, go past the boulder pile and keep walking, did some filming, came back. As I got to that spot I mentioned earlier, about a quarter mile before you get to that boulder field, there's a deer leg, like it was torn off, like just torn off a deer. It looks like a foreleg, not a rear leg, and it was laid right in the middle of the trail where I'd almost have to trip over it. Now, I had to see it, and it was not there earlier. And I'm thinking, oh, something placed this on the trail for me to. And I think these gifts are not. People say, oh yeah, that's part of the deer. It tore the leg off, and it just wants to tell you that's what's going to happen to you if you try to come after me. And I always thought that was a stupid way of looking at it. I always looked at it. They eat deer. They eat turtles. They probably seen us eat, and they probably don't know what the hell we're eating. They probably think we're interested in the same food they are. So out of common sense, I believe they gifted me a deer leg and a turtle shell, and I left them both behind. I'm like, I'm not eating the deer leg. Turtle shell I should have taken. But it was just, to me, that's a personal experience. It's no evidence. But for lack of anything, the only thing I could think of that did that was maybe a raven or a crow put that turtle shell there. But the deer leg, finally, when I saw the deer leg, I go, wait a second, what's going on here?
That's like when you see the deers up in the tree. It's like there's certain things that there's just no other explanation for, especially depending on the woods you're in. It's like
Yeah.
what's doing that type of stuff. Like there's no other explanation besides some type of, unidentified quote apex predator.
Yeah, I mean, and how can you explain the structures? You see the X structures, you see the teepees, you see the wood stacks, and you're going, God, Boy Scouts went all the way in here to build what looks like a failed survival shelter that couldn't even keep the snow or the rain out. And there's no, people, when we do stuff, even I was a Boy Scouts, you sort of do things with symmetry to them. You try to make it look good. No, this is like, it's not symmetrical in the respect of how we think about art, but the teepees I saw are perfectly round, and all the sticks or ridge poles aren't the same length. It's not like an Indian teepee of 12 or 18, lodge poles. No, these are all different length, and many times a lot of the sticks used in these teepees are debarked. They're broken on either end. They're approximately the same length, and they're all leaned up with a central feature. The central feature is always a living tree or this 30, 40-foot long, debarked, dead tree or giant branch that's placed in the center, leaning on another tree, and then they use that as the centerpiece, and then they build the teepee around it. That's the one I saw when I was in Northeast Iowa last week. And I have the video of that. And I showed Becky from the path 80 feet away we were walking on. It just looks like an anomaly. And you're going, what is that dark thing over there? It looks like part of an upside down tree. Well, when I walked down to it, I'm like, holy cow, it's a teepee. And then right behind the teepee was an arch pinned down. It had a fairly old arch, but it was there for some time. So I showed her the video, and I did the close-up video, and I go, "That's what's down here." She goes, "Oh my God, it's a teepee." And I've encountered them around here where I live, but it's not like you encounter in the Rockies or out west in Utah or up in the San Juan Valley. There's huge 20, 25, 27 foot tall teepees, huge hundreds of branches laid into it. And I still have not found a legitimate explanation for why they do teepees or the X's. Everything you hear on the internet is all supposition and speculation. The X's are letting you know it's their territory. The X's are letting you know don't go beyond this point. The X's are, one guy says the X's are means that they're friendly Bigfoot. They're not aggressive. Same with the teepees. The teepees mean it's a form of art. Others are like, maybe it's a gathering place where all the family gets together and they all put their own sticks in.
Maybe
So
the
when you have a
simplest
teepee,
answer is the correct one. Maybe they simply do it because they're an intelligent being and it's a means of entertainment. I mean, it may
it could
not
be a lot
even
of
have
things.
to
It could
have a
be,
meaning. It could just
yeah,
be they just do it just to do it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people do just to do it. Why do
yeah. You
we
just
stack rocks? Why do we go on hikes? Why do we? It's just entertainment, something to do,
maybe. I mean, from an ancestral standpoint, they're people. Their parents and grandparents and their great grandparents, the families have been coming to this area for a long time. So when, I thought, well, maybe when the teepee starts out, there's only, maybe when their great grandparents did it, there was only six. I've seen teepees with just 6 or 7 sticks in them. I've seen teepees 4 sticks going up, pyramidal shaped, just 4 with a tree in the middle. And I thought, okay, let's look at it this way. If you want to say it represents a family, okay, the one with the 4 leaning up are the family members. The middle thing, that's the father, or that's the alpha, grandfather, or whatever. And then generations later, you come back, and in that spot or same area, now you see teepees that have hundreds in there. Now you're talking about multiple families. The grandparents had 4 or 5 kids. Now you got a family of 70 or 80 in this clan, which are all related, and they're all putting their own individual. Now that's a speculative thing I came up with.
It's a
Maybe
literal family tree, like in the most
it's a
literal
literal
sense. It's a
family
family
tree,
tree.
and they're all adding their own lean up every time. And then you see the little ones by the kids. They're shorter and smaller, and they're all leaned up in the teepee. So I always wondered about that, or am I overthinking it? And it's just an area they like so much that the Bigfoots that were putting the teepee up were putting effort into it to make these beautiful teepees. So when any of their groups, clans, or other clans they know of are traveling through the area, they see it and they're like, that has some kind of meaning to them, whether it's artistic, which it could be artistic license, or it's just something that they do, just like you said, humans do, which you ask people, why do they do it? And they go, because.
I mean, it could even simply be eye coverage. I mean, we were talking a bit earlier. I don't know if it was before we actually started recording or not, but just people missing things just because they're simply not moving. I mean, how many times have people probably walked past one of these things in the woods just because they're standing perfectly still and people's eyes catch eye movement? That being said, these things obviously are made to be out in the woods, so they don't need those structures for things like that. I mean, maybe they'll
They
make
don't
like the
need,
grass
yeah,
things for wind and everything, but maybe
yes,
they make these structures simply so they have something to stand in and look out, and things walking past, it'll just all blend in
can't see
together.
them, or they don't even have to be in them. They could be standing behind them and use that to break up their outline.
Yeah,
All
that's what
these
I'm saying. They can
ideas,
just look right
yeah.
through it. That would make sense why they're not covered, is because it's more
Early
so
on, when
intended
I
just to be
discovered,
coverage.
yeah, and that's a very good possibility. I mean, early on when I discovered structures and I started exploring the internet to find out any reason why they were doing this and what it had to do with anything, and what early on the discussion and speculation on the Bigfoot community was the bigger teepee structures, oh, they're living in, they're having their babies in, or whatever. And then that sort of evolved into, well, maybe they're using it to conceal, to break up their outline, using it as a hide, as some people say, just like hunters use. Maybe they're doing it for that. maybe, and I'm thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, they can hide anywhere in the forest they want. They don't need a teepee to hide or conceal. They don't need it. People are saying, well, maybe when the mothers get to a certain age and they start birthing, they have to go in, they birth the infant in these structures. And there's not just those structures. I found hut-like structures,
I
which
was gonna
actually have.
say those huts and those grass huts, those ones are the ones that I think that they adamantly use. But
I would
that being
think
said, with those
I would
ones,
almost go to say they use those to birth in, and you'll always find them in watersheds near lakes or rivers, because I think they would do that. What do they do? Just like,
I
uh,
mean, wind coverage too. I feel like those might be some pretty good like wind coverage if there's
but I
like
mean, you
days where
mentioned
there's
it
height.
earlier. Look at what Xana did with her newborn. She went down to the Volga or whatever, and she washed them in ice cold water, and they died. Uh, I think they do this because they want to find out if their babies are going to survive. They have to build their resistance to cold, and they test them when they're infants if they're going to make it. They have too much Homo sapien DNA, maybe they die. But the interesting thing is, I thought, well, maybe they're doing these. Some of the major teepees I've heard about and even seen are close to the rivers. And so I picture if they're using the teepees to give birth on and then taking their infants down to the river and washing them in, that would make sense. But so far, I don't think they use teepees like we think they do. I think they use nests, very
I'm
similar
with you
to
on
what they
that
find
point.
in the Olympic project. There were 24. They started up initially 12 nests, but they take all these huckleberry branches and they gather them and they make these thick beds that are anywhere from 5 to 6 feet wide by 8 to 9 feet long. Uh, it's like having a giant recliner made out of basically huckleberry branches and vines. And they just stack them in there. I think one of them they said was anywhere from 2 to 4 feet thick. And one of the researchers laid in it because it was outdated. It was starting to deteriorate, but he laid in it. He goes, my God, this is comfortable. It's like a recliner. And they found on the top of this ridge, believe there was initially 12 of them. And if you got to a certain point on the bed where you could see through an opening, you could see the next bed. If it was 25 yards away or 100 feet away, you'd see the next one, and you go to the next one, and from that point, you could see the next one. They discovered 12 of these huckleberry beds. I've discovered beds in my hot spot made out of, guess what we have, which is very common here, corn stalks, layered up, very thick, in the tree line on the edge of a cornfield. I found
Are
3
they
of those.
weaved too? Because I've heard a lot of people talk about them being
Yeah, they
weaved,
were
but they're
weaved. They
weaved
were
so
weaved in.
tight.
The corn stalks were weaved together to create like a bed-like mattress, and there were other weeds in there. And I went in and crawled in there, and I thought, geez, I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'9", but I thought a 6-footer could lay in there. 6-foot person could lay in there, like this far, and you'd be fine. You'd be comfortable. So I think, yeah, we don't have huckleberries. We have raspberries, which are, they're not comfortable to lay on. I want to lay on raspberries. But I was like, when I saw this, I was like, well, we don't have huckleberries here in the Midwest, but we have a lot of silage that's left over from corn and soybeans. So even when they don't harvest the corn, what's to prevent them from taking the corn that they peeled off the stalks and taking all that silage in the stalks? And that's what I found in one of them. And I was like, that's right where the stick was thrown at me. And I didn't know that was there. I just saw the corn stalks knocked over, laying on the ground. I'm like, there's no deer that would come in and knock all 10 or 12 stalks over. And it went in 2 rows. Like they were getting the sweet corn, the sweet grain corn that hadn't fully matured, which is super. It's like the kernels are almost white. I don't know if you've ever had.
Yeah.
Sweet
By the
grain
way,
corn.
you'll also have to tell that stick story because you told me that before we started recording, and I'm sure the listeners will want to hear that one. So we'll have to double back, and you have to tell that stick story too.
Yeah. Okay. The stick story. Yeah, this was. I was walking between a forested area on the edge of a cornfield, essentially a tree line. And I parked my car near there. And the reason I went to that spot is on this finger of this forest that I was walking along, it was only probably not even 70, 65 yards wide from where the tree line hits the cornfield. And then if you go away from the cornfield, the other side of that forested area is the parking lot. Well, I went from that parking lot one day down the trailhead from the parking lot, who runs parallel to the creek, which is whatever, 80, 90 feet away. And I got something thrown in front of me. I saw it just go right through the weeds and hit the foliage on the other side of the trail and break its way through the foliage. And it was a fast pitch, but I just caught it streak by, and I'm going, that's no insect. And no insect crashes into the foliage and keeps going. So I'm thinking, okay, they threw something. And I looked about where this creature would have had to be to throw it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to approach his position from the other side of this finger of this microforce finger that came out to the parking lot. So I came back another day, probably not even a week later, a few days later, and I parked my car closer to where I entered that area by the cornfield where it meets the tree line. So I walk in, and there's a sort of a grassy area next to the tree line of maybe anywhere from 5 to 15 feet of tall grass. And then there's the first row of corn. So I'm walking in, and I see all this corn stalks broken over, and not just broken over, but actually broken off its root. And they're all laying sort of like pickup sticks, like they've been pushed over or knocked over or grabbed and torn over. And every one of them had the corn cobs, the corn taken off of them, and they had no corn on them. But I found some where the corn was laying on the ground, the cob was taken out, and they had stripped away the outer part and left it there, like humans do. And so I found a bunch of the corn shelling, or whatever you want to call it, laying there. And then I found one that had been eaten off of, like we eat corn. It looked like it was, was eating all the way around, all the way down to the base, and it was just laying there. And then I found a second one, which was partially eaten but wasn't finished. But all of them had been dehusked. I see all the husks laying everywhere, corn stalks laying down, and a partial corn cob and one corn cob totally eaten. And I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? As I'm approaching this and trying to figure out what's going on, I get almost all the way past it. I figure I'm going to walk in further and see if I find any more of this going on. I'm thinking, I didn't believe this was deer. I thought maybe they were a bunch of people eating sweet corn. It just didn't make sense to me. So as I'm walking past this area, I hear this like a boomerang sound, like whip past me. And I just saw for a fleeting second just a streak. And I followed it down and looked to the ground, and there's a stick laying on the ground. So it was thrown downhill, is what it reminded me of. Like the toss came from downrange, wherever this thing was standing, or if it was a tall person, it threw it from a position where it was looking down at me, is all I can figure, or it was a tall creature. So I picked it up, and like I said, it was 3/4 of an inch in diameter, probably 12 to 14 inches long. And I picked it up, and I was like, wow. Thinking to myself, wow, this thing, if it is a Bigfoot playing games, I'll find out. And I thought, well, the best way to find out is pick it up. And so I I walked up to the edge of the tree line and I threw it overhead in an arch as high as I could throw it. And I didn't really loft it, but it was like an overhand pitch. And I threw it and I heard it land. And when it landed, it landed in an area I just assumed this thing or many creatures were in. But to my surprise, when I hear it land or thump on the leaf litter, something apparently squatting or sitting in the leaf litter then stood up, and I heard it stand up. It couldn't have been more than 40 feet away from me. It stood up, and I could hear it turn, and then it just casually walked away bipedally, just like a big person would. And where it was apparently in the leaf litter at was a grove of walnut trees, and I eventually went in there later on, and it was like giant ball bearings. There were walnuts everywhere. If you can imagine having 1,000 little league balls you got to walk over, that's how this area was. So it was very hard. I had to be careful when I was walking. It was like walking on ball, and I looked up and there was walnut trees everywhere, and I'm thinking, this is later on, I'm thinking, son of a gun, the thing was in here. It was probably eating walnuts and corn. That's all I can figure. So, but one element I want to digress. I left out one element. After I made the throw and it landed, and this thing stood up after hearing my stick hit the ground, which I assume was near where it was sitting. When it got up, the first thing I did is, I know you're in there, I say, after I heard it get up. Oh, I said that before it got up. I said, I know you're in there, and then I tossed it. This thing got up. When it got up, I took 2, possibly 3 paces into the tree line. What my intention is to see what I just heard get up. And then at some point, it occurred to me, what are you doing? Don't follow it. It's leaving. It doesn't want to be mucked with. So then I just stopped and I go, wait a second. I'm not following him. Had I been with 2 or 3 other people or another person, I might have done it. So then I just left. And I realized, yeah, I spooked one. It threw something at me as if, don't come any closer. I threw it at the same thing. It threw at me back at it to get confirmation to see what would happen. And something happened, and I got my confirmation. And I was like, okay, it's there. Subsequently, I've been wood knocked at. I've had things thrown at me in that area probably more times than I can count. One day I was in there during the day, and they were just throwing shit left and right. It was early summer. It was like, somebody was in there there were a couple people in there with BB guns having a BB gun war. That's what they were throwing. They were throwing it so fast. I could hear shit zipping through the weeds. I was picking it up on my parabolic. I heard movement. I heard dog barks. They're big on the dog barking. It sounds, for the uninitiated, you're going to assume it's a dog bark. When you listen to it closer, it's a whoop. I've been, one day I went in there. I do this usually every end of October, beginning of November. I take our pumpkins from Halloween, and I take them down to the same hotspot area to feed the deer. Because deer will eat pumpkins, and maybe you already know pumpkin is a good dewormer.
Oh, yeah, I use that for my dogs, I used to use it for my reptiles and stuff. Yeah, awesome natural dewormer.
It's a natural dewormer, and my friend who has elk and deer and stuff, he was telling me, he says, yeah, I break up my pumpkins and I feed them to my livestock. So I thought, yeah, so I'd have a bag and I have 3 or 4 pumpkins in it. So I went in there one day. It was early November. I believe it was within the first or second week after Halloween. But I went in there, had the bag of pumpkins. I believe I had 2 medium-sized ones and a small one, a real big one. But I had them in a bag, and I'm carrying them down there. Again, I get to the end of this trailhead, and it winds off into 2 separate trails. I take the one on the right, which goes down to the creek bed where I thought the original rock throws were coming from. So I'm walking down this Y, and I hear, it was sort of weird how it happened. I'm walking down, and I knew they're down there. I just had a sense of it. I always have a sense when I'm there that they're there. And out loud, I go, I'm just setting, and I had done this before and never got a response. I had taken pumpkins to this spot before, and the pumpkins remained untouched. I'd come back and they'd all be rotted. The deers wouldn't even touch them. This time, though, this was just a couple years ago. I go down there, have the pumpkins. I'm walking down. I take just as I'm getting ready to take a right turn to go down this Y in the trail, I hear rock goes past me. I hear it crashing through the foliage, goes across the trail. I'm looking the long way. I don't see where it came from, but I know I was just being warned. I knew it was a rock throw. So I go, it's just me. I'm just here I'm bringing pumpkins for the deer, or you guys, if you want it. Nothing. So I walked down this Y of the trail a little further to this tree. I was going to put the pumpkins right behind, which is where I had put them, the last load of pumpkins. But probably 5 feet further out. It was 5 feet away, 6 feet away from where I usually deploy them. But I put them directly behind this tree. And as I'm taking them out of the bag and I'm putting them on the ground, and I'm thinking to myself, I want to get this done relatively casually fast, but not act like I'm rushed. I didn't want him giving the impression that I'm panicking. So I'm putting the pumpkins down. And as I'm putting them down, I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to take the bag, shove it in my pocket, turn around and leave, right? As I'm in the process of putting the pumpkins down, to my left, there's this brushy area of willows and other bush-like trees that are ground cover up to 6 feet off the ground, but they're thickly brushed on the left here. Right on the other side of that, from where I was standing, on the other side of the brush or bushes and shrubs I couldn't see behind, I get a wood knock, which I estimated, again, 30. They're always like 30 to 40 feet away, but it was a double, not a single. It was like knock, knock, real hard. And I'm thinking, what? There is no big tree. There was a big tree near there, but it was a distance away. And I'm thinking, well, they're just knocking two sticks together. I didn't know if they had a rock and they were hitting a chunk of wood. It was just a loud double knock. And I had just finished putting the last pumpkin on the ground when the second knock finished. And I go, I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm not bothering you guys. I'm not bothering you guys. I'm just dropping off pumpkins. I'm leaving now. So I left. I came back probably a month later, and I went behind that brushy area with the shrubs. And again, I was looking for something they were knocking with, found nothing. No evidence of where the knocking came from. And then I thought I was going insane. I'm like, how are they knocking? And then I get this information from other Bigfoot researchers that they go into certain areas that are devoid of trees, like a grassy area. There are no trees. And the grass is 5-6 feet tall, and they'll hear knocks emerging from the grass. No trees, no saplings. So I've come to the conclusion there are different ways they do knock. I believe sometimes they use branches or sticks or whatever and hit trees with them. I think they also can do the knocks doing mouth pops. And I think they can also they can simulate the knocks. My one friend said he saw one take its hand and hit a large tree and create the knock with his hand. So I think they have multiple ways of creating the knock, but I think the vocalized knock is the easiest one to create because, you know, I don't picture Bigfoot as like a caveman running around with a club, even though I think there are times they do use sticks and clubs. And I've seen just weird structures that are over dried creek beds that the top of the structure you could use as like a roof to get out of the rain, which doesn't make sense because it's a dry creek bed. So I never quite understood, yeah, they're in a creek bed. That's eventually going to flood out during rain, but maybe they don't mind that part. I just I left things behind for them, like I call it a balance bird. You can buy them at truck stops. It's for for kids to play with, but it's weighted so you can set it on like the corner of a chair or on a corner of a table and balances itself. It
Oh, is that
doesn't,
one of those like old toys that spin? Is that what you're talking about? The ones that usually have like a point and then the bird sits on the tip of the beak and it will kind of balance on it? Is that the one you're talking about?
yeah, right where the bird's feet would be, there's a weight. And so you can balance a bird on anything that's got a point on it and it balances. So I picked blue, which everybody talks about blue being Bigfoot's favorite color. I don't know if that's true, but I got a blue balance bird, went to one of their structures, put it in the structure, came back a week later, it was gone. Left him. I'm sort of an amateur rock gemstone collector. I brought milky quartz, uh, fossils. I have a trilobite fossil I found, uh, some iron pyrite, fool's gold, and I had some other stuff that was gemstone quality. It was like milky quartz, and they took it. They've taken all those kind of gifts I gave them. So then I started leaving them food items, apples and blueberries, raspberries, and peanut butter. All disappears. I never find the bottle, the containers, the blueberries and raspberries were in, gone. The apples were in that, was in a bag. I bought a whole bag of apples. Now I'm on like bag number 10, 9 or 10. I drop off a bag. I just got down to, buying peanut butter and apples. And more often than not, I buy the apples and drop them off the whole bag. And the apple bag, everything container disappears. If it's a deer, a rodent, a chipmunk, or squirrel, generally they chew through the bag and the apples fall out. You can see the evidence that, or even deer will do that. They'll chew through it. But the bag is like, I figured, well, they got to carry things like a container, rather than carrying all their apples like this in their arms. Obviously, it would probably be easier if it was me. I'd want to carry a bag full of apples. So again, I can't prove this, but I've been warned about gifting them, not to do it on a regular basis. I do it once or twice a year.
I've heard it a
And
lot, like on your own property, that you just don't want to make it a regular thing. Otherwise, they start to expect it. But if you're going on
yeah,
to other places, dropping stuff here and there, I think the main thing that I've mainly heard about is them just getting mad if it's like an every single day occurrence. Then you just stop doing it one day.
yeah, and then you get them. You're right. You get them used to it, expecting it. And you're right. So I felt, well, rather than dropping something off every week, or even some people go as far as doing it every other day, you create that frequency where they become dependent on your food supply. I thought, no, I'll start out with inanimate objects, like my fossil rocks, my gemstones. My run friend came in with me one day and he brought a poker chip from the bar, from the tavern. We put that in there, and we had a smiley face, blue, sort of shaped like a poker chip, but it was a blue smiley shaped face. And I had a birthday balloon that was blue, slated with whatever helium or whatever that is. But I brought that in there, and this is my early stages of gifting. I wasn't including food because I figured, no, I wanted to be interested in the item and see if they have an attraction to it. And it certainly worked well, because on one occasion I had the birthday balloon tied from its ribbon tied around this tree at an X. I was at an X formation, and I tied the ribbon from the balloon about 5 feet off the ground. And then I put my fossil rocks, my gemstone rocks at the base, and I had that the blue smiley face. There was a crack in the tree, this across in one of the sections of the trees that made this giant X. Yeah, it was all debarked, uprooted, dead trees. They made this X formation, and I found a crack in the tree, and I put the poker chip and my smiley face chip in there. And I tied my balloon up there, and then I had the fossil rocks at the bottom. I came back a few days later. The ribbon that was tied to the balloon that I had tied to the tree, that was missing. It was probably 7 foot long ribbon. That was gone. The poker chip was gone. The blue smiley face chip was gone. And almost all my gemstones were gone, except one small, it wasn't a fossil rock. It was just a river rock that had some cool looking colors in it. It was left behind. And I'm looking and I'm going, where did everything go? And I see the birthday balloon. It was shaped like a heart laying on the ground next to the base of that tree, right behind it, the base of the X formation. And I looked down at it, and it looked like it was on the ground, and it looked like somebody either put their fist or their hand in the middle of the birthday balloon and tried to deflate it, because I could see the appearance of it was like flattened in the middle, but the outside of it still had air in it, and the ribbon was gone. And I'm going, wow, so they're messing with it, or something did that. So I went to pick up the balloon, and under the balloon was the blue smiley face chip. They hid under the balloon right in the center. So I picked it up and I go, oh, smiley face hiding under the balloon. The impression I got from that was like, hey, we like watching you, and we're hiding as we watch you. That was my understanding of it. And then I thought they took the lanyard or the ribbon from the balloon. That was missing. So I left it all there. I put the balloon back, and I thought, that is weird. And I keep encountering this kind of behavior. Another day I went to Hobby Lobby. You know how you can buy the inflatable letters for like your kids' birthdays? I found a gold inflatable big X made out of that Mylar stuff, right? So I went to I had like 2 or 3 different gifting spots, all in this conservation area, this forest preserve. So I went to the second spot I had, and it's a down tree with a root ball, this big root ball next to a creek bed. And the tree was probably 2.5, 3 feet in diameter. It's laying down there. And right where the root ball was, I laid this X right down next to the tree side of the root ball, pretty well hidden. You can come from all 4 directions, and you're not going to see that X until you get right up on that root ball. I had it pretty well hidden in there. I came back a week and a half later, about a week and a half to 2 weeks later. The X was gone, and a really nice looking walking stick was laid where my X was. So I took the walking stick home with me. Another time I go down there with my wife. We go down the trailhead just a ways. Didn't go very far. I took her to the spot where you go down the Y, and I said, the creek's right there. And then we turn around and come back. We got back out to the parking lot. While we were gone, 2 walking sticks were leaned up at the trailhead that were not there when we entered. We were only down there we're only gone for maybe a half hour. So I first dismissed it, and I said, oh, maybe I didn't see those coming in. And Becky goes, no, there was a short one, perfect for her. She's 4'10". And then there was one for a person my height. So, if you put your elbow at a 90-degree angle, that's how I measure a walking stick. The height of it was about that height for me. And then she had a shorter one. So again, this is all assumption on my part. But this keeps happening with frequency, that my number 1 hot spot, I'm sure they know me by now. And I get activity when I go down there, and I play music. and they react. Usually they react when I quit playing the music. So that was in the area where I had the stick tossed at me. And then I have a video in that same spot where I actually recorded a rock throw. It was on a scrub through of a video I had done months earlier, probably half year earlier, and I had forgotten about it. And I scrubbed through the video, and it shows me taking a right turn at that Y to go down where I left the pumpkins. And I was filming down the trail, but I had looked to either, I believe I looked to my left or my right. And when I did that, I heard something go right past me. And at that point, I believe I turned around. I realized that something had been thrown. Never even thought I caught it. Later on, I scrubbed through that. 6 months later, there's a golf ball size rock shooting from right to left at high speed. So I slowed it down to quarter speed, and it's pretty obvious what it is. And I've submitted it to a couple people that do Bigfoot research, and they go, that is an actual rock throw. And it almost reminds me of how somebody would throw something a sidearm pitch, like a softball. It was like sidearm or even underarm. If it was overhead, they wouldn't need to throw it overhead anyhow. I think this thing was in the brush, off the trail, either down on all fours or at least crouched down, and it threw it. Sidearm is my assumption. But I caught that on video, and that's, I think that video is titled Rock Throw Recorded or something of that nature.
You'll have to send me the link to that one so I can include it down in the show description so everybody can check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll send it to your, well, I could put it in your message for IG.
Okay, yeah, that'd be perfect. And I guess kind of starting to wrap up somewhat towards the end, and hopefully I'm not cutting you off or anything like that. I just got to work in the morning, and it's getting a little bit late. But I definitely love to have you come back on again, hopefully sooner rather than later this time, because I know we still have a lot of different stuff to talk about because we touched base on like 10 different subjects through this conversation today. So, but if you're going to leave the listeners with some words of wisdom today, what might it be?
Don't take your life too serious. Try to have fun when it's appropriate and enjoy life. And so don't take yourself too seriously. And I could also say, be aware that everybody has a different perspective on things. And it's always good to step back and let other people tell you what they either hear or see, which many times will help tremendously when whether you're building something or doing research. It's always great to have another informed opinion or a perspective from another person. Nobody can do it alone. And the people that claim they can do it alone sadly get disappointed because you're basically working within your own echo chamber when you do things alone. And so I usually take people that don't agree with me too. I always feel, don't be afraid to make friends with people that don't agree on everything you say or do. Sometimes it's better to have somebody who disagrees with you because they're not afraid to tell you the truth.
Ain't that the truth? And I mean, that's kind of like the foundation of a lot of what I do for the show is the whole idea of I want to try to collect as many perspectives on as many different things as possible to hopefully find that meeting point in the middle. Because like you said, if you do a lot of research on your own, you get stuck in your own echo chamber. But, you know, if you're hearing a bunch of different people's versions of what they think, how reality functions, if you're hearing a bunch of different people's ideas of Sasquatch research, paranormal research, all of that, then it gives you a better spot to kind of find some middle ground amongst all of it, to kind of build yourself a foundation to know where to keep continuing at. Because there's stuff you'll hear just one person say, and then there's stuff you hear 10 different people say with 10 different perspectives. And if that's the case, then that's probably something to hold on to right there.
Oh, yes, definitely. And it also give you confirmation.
Oh, yeah.
What you're doing, you're on the correct path. Because if you get that confirmation from different people with different outlooks and perspective, and you find out, oh, they're confirming the evidence or even my personal experience, then you've got meat on the bone. You got something to work with. because that confirmation is, it's always great to get a corroboration. And if you, and there's people out there that are under the radar, do research on their own and just don't go public with it. And those are some of the people I deal with. And Ricardo's one of them. He told me one day, he says, hey, I'm here to, we disagree on a lot of stuff. And he told me, he says, he was more concerned about Bigfoot than Dogman. He's not afraid of Dogman. To him are not that fearful thing that you hear about. He says Bigfoot are like people. They have attitudes. Some don't. Some are assholes. Some aren't. He says they're just like our population of people. So you always hope you get a group that haven't been shot at, picked on, hurt, or members of their group killed. And so far, I've been fortunate that way. I've seen him 5 or 6 times during the night with my naked eye and with cameras. So it's, what else can I say? People, if you're interested, look into it for yourself, confirm it for yourself. That's another thing I think a wise old man told me once. He said, if you want to find out, go out for yourself and find out, be your own investigator. If you're waiting for somebody to serve it up on a silver platter, you'll know nothing. All you'll know is lies.
Yep. And I mean, honestly, following what other people are saying is almost like forming another whole belief system. Like the only way you can really get to the root and the answer of anything is if you figure it out or see it react or see it happen yourself.
Exactly.
And if anybody wanted to come and check out all of your awesome videos, all of your awesome research you do, any of that type of stuff, or even contact you possibly about some of their own personal Squatch experiences or anything like that, where can people come and get a hold of you on the internet, man?
Yeah, you can contact me through my email. It's D Schneider, spelled Schneider, just as you see on the screen. It's dschneider454 at gmail.com. My YouTube channel is Unacknowledged and Unknown on YouTube. And you can find me on Rumble at U52, one word. U52 on Rumble, and you can find me on Instagram at Unacknowledged and Unknown on Instagram. So you can reach me, you can DM me on any of those platforms, or contact me through email. So there you go.
Well, I will make sure I include all of those down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And as usual, Don, I really appreciate you making the time to come on, sharing all of your personal insight and knowledge on all these different topics. And as usual, man, I'm always looking forward to next time and the next time we get to chat.
It's been my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. It's been an experience and an honor.
Oh, yeah, you're always welcome on the show.